Meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Middletown pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act and laws of 1975. The public has been notified that the Planning Board will meet on December 18th, 2013 at 6:30 p.m. in the Town Hall. The Middletown Planning Board notified the Asbury Park Press, the Independent, the Star Ledger, and the Two River Times on December 13th, 2013. Notice of the meeting was filed with the Township Clerk and posted in Town Hall on December 13th, 2013. All notification of this meeting was given pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to this meeting. May we stand for a salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a reading of the agenda, please? A roll call.
Mrs. Peter? Mrs. Birdville? Here. Mrs. Farrell? Mr. Days? Mrs. Granahan? Mr. Ball?
Here.
Mr. Cordell?
Here.
Mr. Rathjen?
Here.
Mrs. Sheehan? Here. Mr. Wilton?
Here.
Thank you. This evening, we have under administrative matters, the payment of vouchers, and under old business, American properties at Middletown.
Okay, I also need the approval of the minutes, please.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approval of resolutions, we have 3 tonight.
Number 2013-100, Scott Rathburn was a withdrawal of a minor subdivision. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Brightfield?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mr. Rathjen?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilton?
Yes.
2013-205, 767 Main Street was an approval for a minor site plan. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Brightfield?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mr. Rathjen?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilton?
Yes.
And then we have the meeting dates and time for 2014. We need a motion, please.
So moved, and with comment, January, February, March, and April, and May, we will be having 2 meetings a month. Just want to let everybody know that.
Second.
Mrs. Brightfield?
Yes.
Mr. Ball?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mr. Rathjen?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilton?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have anything, this is an open meeting to the public for any non-agenda items? Nothing for non-agenda. Okay, we have payment of vouchers, please.
I'll make a motion to approve payment of vouchers dated December 18th, 2013 for a total of $12,172.02.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Results of this.
No, it's just the resolution.
Okay, we're ready to start with the Heritage at Middletown, and where do we stand by?
If I could summarize, perhaps, it might be easy. In that last hearing, it was carried to the early December meeting, and this special date was established at the work meeting. So the notice was carried to tonight. At the last meeting, we left it off with Mr. Schmanowitz then having the right to cross-examine the objectors to experts, Mr. Steck, their planner, and Mr. Mornier, their engineer. The shortcut, I don't mean to step on anybody's toes here, the understanding today is that the applicant has decided not to cross-examine Mr. Steck or Mr. Mornia. They don't have to. They're right. They don't need to. They feel it's not necessary. So the next step in the process then would be for the applicant to put on their rebuttal witnesses that they planned, and I assume they have a few of those. And then from that point on, then there might be a request by Mr. Gazarovski to have basically rebuttal and re-rebuttal. All that is within the discretion of the chair. Has to be on something relevant, new issues, things like that. Under the court rules, under our rules and regs, under the rules of evidence, all rebuttal are basically discretionary within the court or here the chair. So at this point, then, it's open to Mr. Shimanowitz to present whatever rebuttal testimony they feel is appropriate. After all that testimony is in, we still have to have public comment.
Mr. Gazarovski.
Mr. Chairman, just one housekeeping item. In light of the fact that I have withdrawn my request for the interpretation of the zoning board of adjustment, I think it would be proper this evening to have two votes. The first vote being whether or not the road in question is a collective road, and then once that determination, then a vote on the application itself.
Well, that would be up to the chair of the board at the end of the testimony. I mean, it's not illogical. I mean, I understand the point.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ron Shimanowitz for the applicant, American Properties at Middletown. I would much agree with Mr. Gorman's summary of where we are today and the applicant's position. We certainly listened to the objective's case. Certain items were raised, and we thought it would be the most productive and efficient way to address some of those items that I'm sure are important to the board through rebuttal testimony. We've sort of zeroed in on what we think are the essential issues raised by the objector's case. So that's our goal today. I would agree with Mr. Gorman's response to Mr. Gazarovski's last comment about how the board should vote tonight. The case isn't over, so certainly the chair and the council and board members will deliberate on how you wish to vote. You will be sure to lock yourself into that right now, but it is not an unfair comment by Mr. Gazarovski. It's an issue you'll have to deal with. So with that said, and in the interest of time and moving along, I'd like to call my first rebuttal witness, which is Mr. Copeland.
Mr. Coco was sworn. He still remains under oath in this matter, but just for the record, then, just state the full name, please.
Alfred Coco, COCO.
And he's the professional engineer who testified in the Fred, were you here during all of the hearings in this matter? Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And in particular, were you here for the last hearing when Mr. Gazarovski presented Mr. Livornia's testimony and Mr. Steck's testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And recall during that testimony, some issues were raised with regard to the applicant's proposal for the design of the roads in the project. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And have you had an opportunity to investigate that issue and draw certain conclusions and opinions as to the issue raised?
Yes, we again reviewed the residential site improvement standards, the RSI standards that are really the standard by which the site is designed. And specifically, we reviewed what's called Table 4.3, which has the hierarchy of streets and design standards for streets and the various stages that they can come. And we confirmed in our mind that the internal driveway system is considered a residential access. It is in a high-intensity area. High-intensity is a calculation based on how many units per acre there are. And to be high-intensity, you have to be 8 units per acre or more. So we use that higher standard. We have non-parallel parking. And we have parking on both one side and two sides with non-parallel or perpendicular parking. And we comply with the 24-foot wide aisleway and basically 18-foot deep parking stalls. There is no parking because this is more of a driveway with parking on both sides than it is a street. But nonetheless, that's the standard that applies. I think in addition to that, regardless of the intensity of the development, whether it's low, medium, or high by the calculation, in all cases, for all intensities, the amount of traffic on these streets or routes or whatever you want to specify can't exceed 1,500
average daily trips a day. And on the east side of the site, we generate approximately 825. And I beg your pardon, on the east side, we generate 640 trips. On the west side, we have 825 within each side of the development, neither of which exceed 1,500. So we are well within that criteria to use these standards. One of the other questions that was raised was the installation of sidewalks. Table 4.3 requires sidewalks or graded areas on both sides of the road, but there's an annotation on that column that brings it back to another standard within the RSI's section 5:221-4.5 D and E, basically. And it basically says that there's sidewalks on both sides of the street, but unless the applicant shows there's an alternative pedestrian system that provides safe and convenient access. And it says sidewalks along non-parallel parking should be placed parallel to the street. We believe we've complied with this, with perhaps one or two small exceptions that I think Mr. Keaty raised in his letter, and in the review letter, which we've agreed to accommodate by placing some small sidewalk sections in where we believe to be in complete compliance with that. The only thing that we don't comply with in the RSIS standards is there is also a standard when you have parallel parking that's parallel with the traveled way, where it requires the traveled way to be 21 feet and the parking stall 7 feet. We're exceeding that by keeping all of the driveways and roadways within the development 24 feet. And that's another issue that was brought up earlier in my testimony, and we filed an agreement to exceed the standard. It's not less than the standard, it's actually exceeding. Finally, on the other issue that I think Mr. Libordi was bringing up was we have dead ends. We have areas where there's a driveway, there's buildings on both sides, and there's one building long. The standards allow for dead-end streets to be no more than 300 feet long before they need a cul-de-sac. And in all cases on the site, all of our dead-end streets or driveways are less than 300 feet. So the RSI standards allows us to design the site the way we have. If the driveways were exceeding 300 feet, then you would have to put in a cul-de-sac. And these are for basically dead-end streets that don't have alternative access. We have several loops within this development that again comply with the residential on-street parking, non-parallel parking standard that are connected to each other. So it's really only these both dead ends that we're talking about. In my opinion, I believe we're in conformance with that standard.
Just to recap, Mr. Coco, as to the internal driveway, or what you call residential access road, it's your opinion that the applicant's proposal complies with the RSIS standard?
Yes, with the exception of exceeding parallel parking. We have 24-foot wide parkway instead of 20-foot.
And as to sidewalks where the applicant does not comply with RSIS, the applicant is going to install the sidewalks to make it compliant?
Yes, and as I said, there's only, I think, sort of 3 small areas on the sides of the buildings where we can have the sidewalks in accordance with Mr. Keating's recommendations.
And as the dead-end issue that Mr. Lamornia raised, in your analysis of the RSIS is supporting compliance because the roads that dead-end are less than 300 feet in length, is that correct?
Yes, specifically, there are 2 illustrations in the RSI standards. There's illustration 13, 14. One is called the multifamily court, and one is called the multifamily access cul-de-sac. The multifamily court is what is the standard we're applying for us.
Mr. Coco,
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. From what I've read and from what I've heard, it appears that the cutoff for determining whether the revised Taylor Lane is a collector road seems to be 1,500 average daily trips.
No, we're sort of mixing apples and oranges. What I'm talking about is the internal street design of the site. This does not address Taylor Lane,
Revised
as
Taylor Lane.
classified by the RSI standard or the zoning ordinance. It's only about the system within the development.
So now, you mentioned 1,475 average daily trips.
1475 is the total for the project that's being generated on both sides of the development that's going on to Taylor Lane. like each individual side has, because it's separated by a road, and we're looking at those driveway connections to the Taylor Lane. Those trips are, that's 800 on one side.
So you're not saying that it's 1,475 average daily trips on Taylor Lane, the revised Taylor Lane?
What I'm saying is that the 1475 trips is what's generated by this site onto Taylor Lane. That doesn't include the traffic that's on Taylor Lane today, or will be in the future, outside the site. Only from the site.
Right, thank you.
Last issue, Fred, is in the objector's case, there was an issue raised with regard to our geotech report, the appropriateness of that. Could you speak to that issue?
Yes, when I listened to Mr. Labordi and I went back and read the transcript, it appears that he reviewed the soils test, soils report, which was prepared by a geotechnical consultant, and had some opinions about what the modeling meant in the soils and whether or not we appropriately applied it. Modeling is an indication. Modeling means there's a discoloration in the soil that is an indication of where the high waters have high seasonal groundwater high tables. In the design of the site, in accordance with DEP standards, we're not allowed, when we're building a detention basin, the floor of the detention basin must be 1 foot above the seasonal high groundwater table. The soils engineer went out to the field, did tests in the locations of the where the detention spaces are going to be, and provided us with where the estimated seasonal high water table is. And we use that. And we in fact use it for the design. And in fact, that information was supplied to the Department of Environmental Protection. They reviewed the stormwater management plan and the calculations and the soils report, and they have approved the design. I think Mr. Labordi's comments, I remember reading something about basements, and I guess what he was trying to say was there are other areas on the site, not where the detention basin is, where the seasonal high water table is higher. It's a couple feet, 3 feet below the surface. And he was suggesting that basements, there should be a restriction on basements. We don't have basements, so it's not applicable. So I'm not certain where he was going with it, but I would like to just reiterate that the information was done, submitted to the department. He approved the design as it is, and they used the same information to correctly design the site.
I have a question. The buildings, are they on concrete slabs, or do you have a crawl space underneath? Is that like a 3 foot or 4 foot deep crawl space?
These are concrete slabs.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing further, Mr. Coker.
Sure.
I went back and looked at as many of the transcripts as I could without, spending all day reading these things. So when you had said that from the east side of the site, 640 total trips per day, where does that come from?
That's a number that comes right out of the RSIS standards. That, and I had Mr. Troutman's help with that, because there was we use the ITE trip generation, and he has the most current value. I'd like Gil support this, but it's basically the number and type of units times trip generation rate.
Because within RSIS, they have trip generation for different housing types, right?
Exactly, yes.
So you made that calculation. I apologize, I have a book when they supposed to have books from RSIS, so it's a little bit out of date. It may not be the most current. So you use the residential condo townhouse standard
Yes.
at 5.9?
No.
Was it?
I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Troutman. He and I worked this out on the phone and came up with these values.
Okay. So the number is the 640, and I assume the 825 come from Jay Troutman?
Yes, he and I worked it out.
Now, I want to make sure I understand your testimony. That adds up to 1465. You got 640
And
and
820.
825. So I got 1465. That goes out to Taylor Lane. How would you classify Taylor Lane? If there's 35 more cars, or 36 more cars, trips per day on Taylor Lane, would that send you over the 1,500?
Well, actually, Mr. Gorman, we have 2 other witnesses that are going to deal with this issue. I'm not presenting it. You could have me answer the question, but we do plan to cover this issue by experts who are prepared for that question.
But I understand, but The heart of what your testimony seemed to be was that these are not this is not a collector road, it's a local road.
He didn't,
Within the development.
Yeah.
Okay, not Taylor Lane.
he has not specified
okay.
as to the nature of Taylor Lane.
Got it. Okay, that makes it clear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I confused you.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't quite sure.
Mr. Hall asked the same question, perhaps we weren't fair enough in our answer.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay, not Taylor Lane.
The objectors raised some concern about our actual site design, the real planning type issues, and we wanted to address that. This is all the internal road stuff.
Was that an issue?
It was an issue raised by Mr. Livornia, and that's...
Internally, that they were still collector roads internal?
No. It just was,
Mr. Livornia had comments about the design of the interior streets as they relate to RSI. It's not, we didn't make the issue of it being the local collector as far as the internal streets on each side.
that's all we have for Mr. Cook.
In all fairness, I don't know what you gentlemen want to do, but Mr. Gazarovski is going to have a shot at cross-examining and whatever, I don't know if you talked about in what order, whether you're going to preserve, whether you're going to do it witness by witness.
Before you start, Mr. Gazarovski, does anybody on the board have any pertinent questions right now? Okay.
Mr. Gazarovski, if you want to take, we do have another mic, and we have a portable one too, so maybe you want to use the portable one. I think that's working, that might be better. Sure, you know what, if you, hey, Ron.
I'm just going to ask, I only have a couple questions.
Okay.
Good evening. Okay. I just have several questions. Your initial testimony, as was clarified by Mr. Hall as well as by Mr. Gorman, is that the testimony you gave as to traffic only related to traffic within the development on either side of revised Taylor Lane.
Well, when you say traffic, what I'm relating
Trip
to
generation.
trip generation as shown in the RSI
Right.
for the classification of the internal street system.
There was never an argument made by the objector, was there, that in fact those internal streets were collector roads, wasn't it?
No, but I think what Mr. Livorni was saying was his opinion that we did not comply with the RSI standards.
But he never raised an issue, we never made the argument that the internal roads within this project were collector roads.
I don't believe he did.
Okay, fine. Now, I take it that the figures that you have, which you gave to the board, which totals somewhere around 1450, give or take 25 cars or so, that is the projected new traffic which will be coming onto the revised Taylor Lane.
As it relates to the RSI's design standards, yes.
And I take it that you got those figures from Mr. Troutman, who was the traffic consultant.
Correct.
Now, were there not also figures for existing traffic that was presently on, for the sake of argument, we'll call it Old Taylor Lane?
Yes, but as I testified to, what I'm here tonight to clarify was the design of the internal street systems, everything but Taylor.
I understand that.
So, in terms of adding traffic to that, I think Mr.
I understand that. I understand that. But you referred to Mr. Troutman's report, did you not?
No, I actually just referred to the calculations he had discussed.
Okay. Did you ever either read the report or get a calculation from him as to what the existing traffic was on Old Taylor Lane?
Mr. Chairman, we're not going to do this tonight anymore, okay? I presented Mr. Coco for a very limited purpose, rebutting a very specific issue. Mr. Gazarovski's talking about Taylor Lane. We didn't mention Taylor Lane whatsoever. The objectors raised an issue about our internal roads and that they were insufficient in terms of the standards set forth in our science. That's what we addressed. We're going to get to Taylor Lane, I assure you. Your witnesses will do that. But I'm not going to waste time on an issue that just, we didn't
I sort of agree with you here. I do agree.
In all
I
fairness,
know Taylor Lane is going to be a separate
it was slightly unclear, but I think we clarified that he's not talking about Taylor Lane.
at all.
Right, at all. It's only the internal streets here of 1465.
Correct.
Okay.
One last question. You were present, of course, when Mr. Livornia testified.
Yes.
Now, what effect did his testimony with regard to the modeling that was present in those test pits which were taken, what significance, if any, did you attribute to that?
Nothing, because he had it wrong.
Yeah, okay. I have no questions.
Okay. Let's go for your next witness.
Mr. Manowitz, I hate to do this, but at some point, the public has a right to ask questions.
Absolutely, and if you wish to do witness by witness, let's keep rolling.
How many more witnesses?
We have two more witnesses. We have Mr. Troutman and we have Mr. Phillips.
And Mr. Troutman,
If you wish to
more
have
to
the
more to
public...
say,
I would like to go with the two witnesses and then have the public,
ask questions
Ask
of
questions.
all three.
yes,
Whatever you...
I think would be better.
If that's your recommendation,
Yes.
go with that, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Jay Troutman.
And Mr. Troutman, if you can state your full name for the record again, please.
Yes, Jay Troutman, Troutman.
And Mr. Troutman, that previously testified, was sworn as their traffic engineer. You also have a PE in the state of New Jersey,
That's correct.
and you specialize in traffic engineering.
Yes.
If I could just jump in before we start. There's many people standing in the back. Maybe those of you that are sitting down, if you could move one way or the other and let everybody sit down. I hate to see people standing for, I'm thinking we might be here for a few hours. Sorry. There's plenty of room, I just, it's not like there's seats.
We should be able to fit 7 on a seat. I do have some up front here also, folks. Okay? Here, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Troutman, you were here through the hearings in this matter, is that correct?
Yes.
And in particular, were you present during the last meeting where Mr. Gazarovski presented testimony by Mr. Livornia?
I was.
And you listened to Mr. Livornia's testimony regarding Taylor Lane and whether it's properly classified as a local road or a collector road. You recall that testimony?
I do.
And have you had an opportunity to investigate that issue and draw some opinion or conclusion on that issue?
Yes, I have done that, and just before I do that, Ron, maybe I could just give the board the benefit of that daily traffic calculation.
I think that'd be great.
Where those rates came from.
Absolutely, that would tie Mr. Coco's testimony nicely. Thank you, Jim.
In RSIS table 4.1, they have average daily vehicle traffic trip generation rates, which are published, with a note that says they defer those rates may adjust to the latest ITE manual. So what I did as a traffic engineer is I looked at those rates, but then I compared them to what the very latest ITE daily rates are. They change a little bit from the table, but they're generally the same. So the calculation goes like this. For the townhouses, it's 5.81 trips per day.
And the chart says 5.9?
Yes.
Okay.
So 196 townhouses times 5.81 is 1,139. And then for the apartments, under low-rise apartment, the 9th edition of the ITE projects 6.65 trips per day.
And may I ask, just because I have the chart in front of me, versus 7.2?
Correct. So 49 apartments times 6.65 trips per day is 326.
So the 5.81 and the 6.65 are ITE standards?
Yes, from the 9th edition of trip generation. And when you add those two together, you come up with 1,465 daily trips for the development.
And then you were able to break that up between east and west, is that what then happened?
Yeah, that's what Mr. Coco actually did.
Back to my original question, which is the issue that was raised as to the nature and classification of Taylor Lane, be it a local road or collector road. Again, you've had an opportunity to investigate that, and if you could give us the benefit of your analysis and opinion.
Right, and our investigation delved into the issue of, once you realign Taylor Lane, have you done anything? Keeping in mind that the master plan has always contemplated that realignment and has been re-examined several times along the way since it was published. With that realignment contemplated, and never has Taylor Lane appeared as a collector street. And by default, it would be a local street because it has not appeared as a collector street in that document. Another interesting thing about that document, when you're talking about collectors and local, is the possibility that Taylor may take on some collector characteristics, and there's actually an allowance for that in a paragraph under the local streets description. In the second paragraph under local streets, it states that some local streets serve as local collectors. While not included in the federal functional classification system, local collectors often serve a dual function of property access and traffic collection.
You're now reading from the Middletown master plan?
Yes, under local streets.
Thank you.
So within the local street classification, you could classify Taylor Lane as a local collector. And at most, I believe that's what it is. It's a local street that functions as a local collector.
Now, you're saying the existing Taylor Lane or the revised Taylor Lane?
Really both, because they will serve the same function under both scenarios, which is they only serve traffic that's accessing abutting land uses or traffic accessing other streets in the local neighborhood. They do not serve any kind of through traffic function, whether it's the existing configuration or the realigned configuration. And there's an example actually in the neighborhood now of a street that could possibly serve a through traffic function. I don't believe it does. I've never seen through traffic using it, which is a street called Cherry Tree Lane. And Cherry Tree Lane connects from Route 35. It starts at Route 35 from the southbound lanes, with Route 35 being a principal arterial, and it travels all the way through the neighborhood and dumps out at Kings Highway, which is a secondary arterial. So Cherry Tree Lane connects two higher functioning roads at either end, but due to its purposeful curvilinear design, it does not carry through traffic. It only carries local traffic, and therefore does not appear as a collector street. It appears as a local street. And Taylor Lane is the exact same situation. Taylor Lane is not going to carry any through traffic anywhere but to an origin or destination within this neighborhood. It cannot be classified as a collector.
Do you realize that? Excuse me, folks. Do you realize that the area you're talking about, in the morning, cars are able to park on both sides of that street to let their children out to walk to school. It's very narrow. And I see a lot of traffic there. So I see an awful lot of traffic in the mornings there.
And when it's snowy and icy.
Can I make a suggestion, please? Whether you think talking in the audience makes it better or not, that's up to you guys. But it doesn't make it better for the public. So regardless of whether or not we can hear past it or have a meeting, the court reporter is going to have a very difficult time. So she's got a tough job as it is. She's trying to get 20 different speakers going here, or 10 different speakers. If there's background noise, it makes it impossible for her to do her job. We won't have a complete record of what's going on. If it winds up in litigation, the record starts to get a little, there'll be blanks, incomprehensible, background noise, things like that. So please, for the young lady's benefit, Keep it to a minimum, please.
Let's continue on this.
Can I ask you a question? Jason, when was the last re-examination of the master plan?
The last re-examination was in 2011.
And when was this property rezoned?
The zoning took place, if memory serves, in 2009.
Now, does the re-examination contemplate size and scope of potential development when you're doing definitions of arterial roads or collector roads?
It doesn't do a site-by-site analysis, but it certainly takes into account rezonings and any kind of policy changes that are at the state, local, and federal level. There was also a re-examination report done in 2009 when the property was rezoned. So it does take into account larger issues regarding circulation.
Okay.
Continue, please.
Another piece of research that we did was we actually went through the list of all the identified collector streets listed in the ordinance. There are 43 collector streets in the entire township. And an exhibit's been prepared, a map, to show us those streets. I'd like to enter that in to evidence.
If I could ask, I have to go back here, we've got a lot going on. What, do you know, Mr. Schmanowitz, what exhibit number is?
I do not, but we'll try to find out and see if we can.
I do not have all the transcripts with me. I apologize. Does anybody have the transcript? I have, let's see. It seems like the last things that were marked were in August. I have 829.
829 was the director of DPW.
Yeah, I think that's the last, So we might be mistaken, but for lack of, as best we can do, we're going to call this 830.
Yes, I believe that is correct, because then we seem to go into objectors, exhibits.
And then we went back and looked at some of the applicants' earlier exhibits, 8.3 and things like that. But I think 8.30 would be the right one. If we made a mistake,
I think we're good with that. So, Jay, if you could describe what 830 is, and also if you could actually mark it with today's date.
Right, yes, I've marked it Exhibit 830 dated 12/18/13. It's entitled Roadway Classification Exhibit, and it's simply a street map of the township of Middletown with roadways showing certain colors based on their classifications. The green color is the Garden State Parkway, classified as a freeway/expressway. Routes 35 and 36 are depicted in a red color as primary arterials. There's a light orange color that's used to depict the secondary arterials. And just for example, near our site, Kings Highway is a secondary arterial, and Cherry Tree Farm Road coming in opposite where Taylor Lane's going to be realigned. That's actually colored by a municipal boundary, but it's also a secondary arterial. And then the collector roads are in a darker orange color on the exhibit. And again, as you can see on our site, Taylor Lane, all the local streets in all the neighborhoods accessed by Taylor Lane, Cherry Tree Lane, are not colored and not identified as anything higher than a local street.
Well, I have a question as to whether or not this is part of the issue before the board.
posed by me is whether or not we rise to the limit of the time and collect the road or not. Testimony is limited solely to that. We have an exhibit here, a lot of color on it. We have some no data as to how the roads are used, what the true generation is like. How is that?
I think we need to clarify a few things. Number one, where did this come from? Where did this data come from?
That came from the 43 collector streets listed in the master plan, and then going on to a street map and finding all 43 of those streets and how they're defined in the master plan and coloring them.
Jay, let's go back a step. The base map that was used to do that analysis, what was the base map that was used, do you know?
The base map I used was just a Hagstrom street map.
Okay, and then you took that Hagstrom street map, went to the Middletown master plan, identified the list of collector streets,
Yes.
and then you colored in those collector streets?
Yes.
Okay. And I would submit that this is a very relevant exhibit, goes right to the rebuttal of the issue raised by Mr. Gazarovski for the board to determine whether something's a collector or local or any other hierarchy, to look at an exhibit that shows how you have designated other streets in the town I think would be highly relevant.
Mr. Gorman, also just to remind you that I provided this to the board with the list of streets.
You have the list of streets and also a map?
Yes.
So similar to this, not
Two different colors, but the same.
same general.
Yeah.
So the board already has a memo from Mr. Greenspan, and it's just taking from the master plan what streets in the master plan are identified as collector roads, or their different status. All the different status? Travis?
Yes, there's the freeways and the primaries and the secondaries are also identified.
I mean, it's certainly before the board. I mean, it seems relevant. I'll leave it up to the board.
What's the relevance of comparing that to the issue which is before this board, is that whether or not Taylor Lane, based upon the traffic which is generated, is or is not a collector road?
Let's get to the heart of it. How do you determine what's a collector road? And if anybody disagrees, you can chime in when I'm done. There's a couple different things. One, our master plan says this. Number two, our ordinance also has a provision at 641, which says that the board, whether it's zoning or planning board, when reviewing an application, I'm paraphrasing, basically then makes a determination as to whether or not a road would be a collector road. That's in our ordinance. And so this is in our master plan and referred to in our ordinance. RSIS, independent of what we have in our own books, says a collector road, and again, I may not be exactly right, but a collector road, one of the indicia of a collector road is one with ADT, average daily traffic, over 1,500 trips a day. And there are other indications about how you would classify a roadway, but this is one of them. And there may be more. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's limited to those or that I fully describe those three different factors, but this is one of them.
I would agree, Mr. Gorman. I don't know how you get around the fact that a map showing other collectors in town and other types of roads wouldn't be of importance to the board in analyzing this issue.
So it may very well be that many of these listed collector roadways have less than the 1,500 trips per day. I mean, much of this data is dated. That's not what's before the board. See, is this particular roadway.
I don't think anybody up here is going to argue that the master plan and that map is perfect, or that contemplates today, or that it may have left things out, or it could have been different. I think that's a given. That it is what's in the master plan. And one could argue that there are roads on there that should be something else, and there are other roads that should be on there. But that's not the issue. The issue is that our master plan? I think Mr. Troutman has represented that it is. Mr. Greenspan basically provided the same information to the board. It's what's in our master plan.
Unless there's an objection, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move on with this exhibit.
Let's move on.
Thank you.
Jay, now that we've identified what Exhibit 830 is, Could you tell us what conclusions you draw from 830? What is the relevancy of 830 to this issue?
Well, as I studied the list of identified collector streets in the township, it became clear that their function was much different than Realign Taylor Lane would be, or Cherry Tree Lane, for example, in that those streets would either carry commercial traffic, would carry local bus routes, or would connect streets of higher classification on either end, and therefore carry through traffic. Its sole purpose is just to get from a street on one end to a street to another, to a street on the other end. And the distinction is that Realign Taylor Lane and existing Cherry Tree Lane do not serve those purposes. They serve the purpose of distributing traffic to abutting land uses, and in the case of Taylor or Cherry Tree Lane, they also have that dual function, that dual local collector function of picking up traffic from smaller streets and bringing it to roads of higher classification, but never do they cross into a collector street classification as you would see in the master plan. And while they may cross the 1,500 average daily traffic threshold, all that means is that they are now crossing into that dual function of a local collector under the local street classification. In order to rise to a collector street, it would be my opinion that those roads would have to carry volumes upwards of 3,000 to 3,500 per day. Then you would start looking at maybe classifying them as a collector street. If they carry through traffic, they would have a number more like that. And they simply do not and will not in the future, because there's no incentive to use these roads as a through route.
Mr. Chapman, I don't want to jump ahead, but have you come up with a final number when you include all of the other traffic aside from the site plan?
Yes, if you take the site, which is roughly 1,500 trips, plus the existing Taylor Lane traffic, which is roughly 800 a day, you would be somewhere in the 2,000, say 2,300 trips per day, which again would rise you up to a local collector, again under the local streets category.
You referenced the Church Farm Road. What was the classification that you gave?
Cherry Tree Farm Road is a secondary arterial. And typically your Monmouth County roadways would fall in that category. Your state highways would fall in your principal arterial category.
So the secondary arterial will be coming into Taylor Lane.
Across the street.
Absolutely.
Jay, when you began your testimony, you were referencing Cherry Tree Lane, is that correct? Or Cherry Tree Farm Road?
I was
Earlier when he was referring to the,
I want to, the record's clear, before the question came forward, when you first started your testimony, you referenced some Cherry Tree Road. Which road were you referring to?
I was referring to Cherry Tree Lane,
Okay.
which connects from 35 Kings Highway, but then when I was talking about the exhibit, I pointed to Cherry Tree Farm Road as a secondary arterial.
And Mr. Wilton's question was, or perhaps it was Mr. Hall's question, was with regard to Cherry Tree Farm Road, correct?
Correct.
Just keeping things straight. Jay, if you want to move away from Exhibit 830, is there additional testimony on this issue you could provide?
Yeah, basically, again, I would just conclude that you can realign Taylor Lane and you can open it up and give it access, more direct access to a second arterial, but if it doesn't take people anywhere, it's not going to rise to the level of a collector street. And there's a couple other documents that you can review to sort of show the consistency between the master plan and other sources. The next thing we looked at was the residential site improvement standards, where they have a system of roadway hierarchy, and they describe what they call a minor collector. They put a minimum average daily traffic count on that of 3,500.
Minimum or maximum?
I'm sorry, maximum. maximum. Thank you. I gotta get reading glasses. So the minor collector category in RSIS would be akin to the local collector category in your master plan. The next jump in RSIS is a major collector, which would have a maximum of 7,500 a day, and that would now be what the township would call a collector street in their master plan, in my opinion. Again, just based on those volumes and those definitions and descriptions. The last.
Stand there a second. But under RSIS, would you agree that this would be a minor collector?
Yes.
Cherry Tree Farm Road is what considered right now what? As a major arterial.
Cherry Tree Farm Road is a secondary arterial.
But you have to remember, we have different definitions in our ordinance as compared to RSIS. I mean, different wording, different terminology, different words.
And RSIS doesn't go that high, because RSIS is all residential streets. They don't get up to dealing with commercial traffic, so they don't have an arterial definition. The highest they go is major collector, just because it's a residential planning document. The last place that we wanted to look was under AASHTO. Mr. Litwarnia had read a definition from AASHTO at the last hearing describing a collector street. But what he did not read to you from AASHTO was how AASHTO defines a local street. So I would like to read the AASHTO definition of a local street. The local street system comprises all facilities not in one of the higher systems. It primarily permits direct access to abutting lands and connections to the higher order systems. It offers the lowest level of mobility and usually contains no bus routes. Service to through traffic movement usually is deliberately discouraged. And that is exactly how this neighborhood functions. Through traffic is deliberately discouraged through a curvilinear design of intersections and streets. And the applicant has already represented that they would continue in that vein by installing a roundabout on Taylor Lane, again, to discourage and fit into that local street function. So again, our finding is that Taylor Lane in the future condition will not rise to the level of a collector street as defined in your master plan. It is one of those dual functioning local streets where it takes on some local collector characteristics. It continues to be a road that will only serve local traffic that has origins and destinations within the immediate neighborhood. And as a local street, it's consistent with the other sources that we looked at, such as RSIS and AASHTO.
Thank you. Nothing further, Mr. Troutman.
Any questions from the board for this witness?
Can I just get a confirmation, just one last time, if you'll allow? The minor collector road, the maximum is what now?
The minor collector road maximum is 3,500 vehicles per day,
That's an RSIS standard?
and that's an RSIS standard.
And these only give maximum, not minimums? There's no like range, up to?
Well, it would be between, based on the hierarchy, it would be between 1,500 and 3,500, because if you were 1,500 or less, you would be a residential access or a residential neighborhood as defined in RSIS.
And then the major collector would pick up from the 3,500, like 3,501 to 7,500?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Where did you come up with the 800 trips from the existing traffic on Taylor Lane? Did you do counts, or is that an estimate?
That's an estimate. A general rule of thumb is that the volume that you count during the weekday afternoon peak hour is about 10% of your daily count. So if you just take your weekday PM peak hour volume and divide it by 0.1, ours is around 80. So you divide by 0.1, you get to 800, and I believe that was the number that was also cited by the objectors, somewhere around 800 to 900.
You either were here or you read Mr. Livornia's testimony on these numbers. And he came up with numbers similar to yours.
That's correct.
Do you take any consideration that if you do have volume of people living here, the number of trips made by service vehicles, delivery service, garbage service, repair service, is that in your figures? Because you will get a lot of service trucks in here, RDS deliveries.
Yes, that is in the daily.
That's in your 1465?
That's correct. Yes, it's included in those daily rates. Those are collected at actual sites where all that is going on.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to clarify your opinion as to the definition of the collector street as set forth in the master plan as opposed to the RSIS. You say they revised Taylor Lane under the master plan definition set forth in the master plan. It's not a collector. It's not a collector.
Yes, the realigned Taylor Lane will not rise to the level of being a collector street as defined in your master plan. It would be more of a local collector as described under your local streets classification.
Can I ask also, just again, I need more clarification, Cherry Tree Lane is considered what type? What is it?
A local street, and it also serves that local collector, that dual function local collector, because it picks up all the different lanes and drives along the way and distributes that traffic out to Kings Highway. Or traffic comes in from 35 South and distributes to the neighborhood drives and lanes. So it serves that dual function like Taylor will.
So it does act as a road to feed people from Route 35 through to Kings Highway?
No, it does not carry through traffic because it takes way too long to go on Cherry Tree Lane. You would go on 35 and just take a right on Kings, but it does.
We said, well, let's keep the comments to ourselves
Well,
right
please
now.
let him tell the truth then.
It does
Excuse me,
act.
ma'am, you will get a chance to speak for a rebuttal, but please, let's listen. Thank you.
It provides access to all the neighborhood streets within, for example, I've listed them all here. Village Lane, Hanson Place, Elm Court, there's a whole bunch of little,
Those are the other side of the
no, those are all within this neighborhood between 35 and Kings.
So did you take into account people, residents, that is, of community, the new development, that they would go through the neighborhood, go through Cherry Tree to get to Kings Highway?
Yes, I did.
Can I ask Jason a question?
Jason, you said that the master plan was revised and updated in 2011, correct?
Yeah.
And yet the 2009 version was used for this property when it was first brought forth, is that correct?
The master plan was comprehensively adopted in 2004. The housing plan was adopted in 2008, and zoning went into place the following year. That following year is when we did a more comprehensive examination of the 2004 master plan. So that was done in 2009. We re-examined it again in 2011. And just following up a little bit on Mr. Hall's question before, there is a recommendation in the 2011 re-examination report that the circulation element of the master plan be comprehensively
So does the master plan specifically identify that a potential revised Taylor Lane would in fact cross into Cherry Tree Farm, or is it in that level of detail?
It doesn't cite Taylor Lane as one of the issues. There
Right.
are other specific items that are cited, but Taylor Lane is not.
Okay.
Any questions? Any more questions? Spoke to you.
We're finished with Mr. Chapman from our rebuttal testimony. If we're following suit, I guess, Gazarovski.
Mr. Gazarovski?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
With regard to the exhibit which is known as M30. Bit closer. Closer?
Yes.
I believe the exhibit which was just marked this evening is identified as M30, is it not?
Yes,
And seemingly what you did was, you went to the master plan, looked at all of those identified roadways, be they arterial or collector, and you placed them upon that exhibit. Is that be a fair statement?
yes,
Now, with regard to that exhibit, after you prepared it, or while you were preparing it, did you go out to the actual locations and yourself personally take any counts as to how those roadways are being utilized?
I did not.
With regard to that exhibit, did you attempt to make an independent study by looking at any historic data as to perhaps other subdivisions or site plans which would have provided you with the traffic counts taken on those collector streets?
No,
So basically, all you really did do was take that which was reflected in the master plan and place it simply on a larger exhibit and nothing else.
yes,
Okay, now, I believe that you read a definition into the record as to what you opined that a collector road was, and I don't want to misquote you, but I think you read a definition which basically stated that a local road is a roadway which is not in a higher system. Did you not say that?
yes,
Okay. Now, in response to a question from Mr. Hall, he specifically asked you whether or not you would opine that revised Taylor Lane is a minor collector street. I believe your answer was, it was your opinion that it was a minor collector street.
As defined under RSIS, I believe realigned Taylor Lane would fall in the RSIS category of a minor collector street,
Okay, now,
which, let me finish, which is equivalent to the local collector category under the local streets classification in the master plan.
well, whether you call it a local collector or you call it a minor collector, it is in fact a higher designation than a local street, is it not?
It is not higher than a local street, it's a dual function
Okay.
street under the local streets
Okay, now-
classification.
I think you gave some explanation to a variation as to the total counts with regard to the proposed project, and I think you referred to utilizing ITE standards, correct?
Yes,
Now, ITE standards are based upon an analysis of traffic patterns throughout the entire United States, is it not?
yeah, that's correct.
But the RSIS is specifically designed to give you those patterns or counts that would exist within the state of New Jersey.
No, the RSIS bases its traffic counts on IT as well.
Isn't RSIS specifically designed to be implemented in the state of New Jersey, utilizing those counts which the state of New Jersey has determined to be those most accurate counts as applied to New Jersey residential properties?
The RSIS has peak rates, daily traffic rates, and they're based on the ITE data. That's what they use to project traffic counts.
Where does it say that?
For New Jersey,
This,
residential developments.
for studies done in New Jersey.
The title of the document is the New Jersey Residential Site Improvement
Okay.
Plans.
Now, earlier on, I think you testified that in your mind, that a roadway would not become a collector street unless it reached the level of 3,000 cars per day. Was that your testimony?
Under the Middletown Township Master Plan, it is my opinion that a roadway would not rise to being a collector street in that list until the daily volume got to 3,000 to 3,500 vehicles per day.
Now, is there anything in the Middletown Master Plan which specifically says that a collector road, in order to become a collector road, must have 3,000 trips per day?
The only thing I found was in the ordinance, I believe Mr. Gorman was citing a section 16,641. There was reference to collectors generally have 3,000 vehicles per day. So it is elsewhere in the ordinance.
Now, and I think I missed it, but didn't you also just use the phrase between 2,500 and 3,000?
No, I said between 3,000 and 3,500.
Now, looking at the reality of what's going to be on Taylor Lane, utilizing the RSIS figures, I believe it's about 1,575, is it not?
1,465
Under the ITE or under the RSIS?
under both.
Oh, now, you also have some counts which establish what the existing traffic is on Old Taylor Lane. And is that approximately between 800 and 900 cars per day?
Yes.
Okay. Utilizing those figures, I mean, that gets you up to, give or take, 100 cars, around 2,400 to 2,500 cars per day.
23 to 2,400, yes.
Okay. Did you make any determination, I think I know the answer to this, as to whether or not those streets which are identified on the Middletown Master Plan as collector streets are in fact having traffic counts of less than 2,400 cars per day?
No.
Would you agree with me that with regard to New Taylor Lane, that existing traffic, which is presently on Old Taylor Lane, will not in any way be diminished?
Yes, I agree with that.
Would it also be fair to say that given this improved width of New Taylor Lane and given the greater access, that in fact traffic unrelated to the proposed project may in fact increase from that which is presently on Old Taylor Lane?
There could be a slight increase, but it would be capped at people who have origins and destinations in the neighborhood and who are probably generally finding their way in and out of Taylor right now the way it exists.
Okay. I have no further questions. One last question. And I want to just make sure we're clear as to this one issue. The New Taylor Lane would ingress and egress into Route 35, does it not? Well, it really egresses onto Route 35, and in some sense, it also ingresses into 35. Is that not so?
That's correct.
Now, directly across the street from New Taylor Lane is Cherry Tree Farm Road. Is that not so?
That's so, yes.
And Cherry Tree Farm Road is classified in Middletown as a minor arterial road.
It's a secondary arterial.
Secondary arterial road. And that, in fact, has a higher classification than a collector road. So it basically means there's more traffic on Cherry Tree Farm Road that would be on a collector road.
That's right.
Now, in your mind, what would be the minimum number of cars that would be utilized by Cherry Tree Farm Road in order for it to be classified as a secondary arterial road?
I'm not sure how they did the classification. I guess it would, if you keyed in with RSIS above 7,500 a day.
So directly across the street from this New Taylor Lane, we have a roadway emptying into Route 35 with some of that traffic coming across the street into Taylor Lane, which generates 7,500 car trips per day.
Cherry Tree Farm Road is a secondary arterial serving many commercial, residential, public uses. So yes, there is a lot of traffic turning between 35 and Cherry Tree Farm Road because it goes somewhere. It carries traffic to a lot of places. So that's why the volume is above 7,500 a day. Completely different from Taylor Lane.
Well, now, it's going to be carrying traffic directly to New Taylor Lane, is it not?
No, it'll continue to carry traffic between Cherry Tree Farm and 35. There's no commercial uses inside Taylor Lane. There's no through route through Taylor Lane. It's only people that want to go in and out of abutting land uses that are accessed by Taylor Lane.
Isn't there a park located at the end of Taylor Lane?
Yes, there is a park.
Don't people go there?
Yes.
Now, one last question. In the previous as-is condition of the road system, one cannot come directly across the street on 35 from Cherry Tree Farm Road and ingress into Taylor Lane, correct?
Correct.
Now, at the time of the last, I'll strike that. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Very good.
I spent a lot of time on this today. I have a question, Mr. Chairman. And when you looked at 16-641 in the ordinance, and that had a you mentioned that had a number of 3,000 in it?
Yes.
Trips per day. Doesn't it also say in there that it would service, a collect road would be one servicing 150 lots or units? All that?
Yes, I do.
So this would be servicing, how many units would Taylor Lane be servicing, providing access? You have, I have 16-641 in front of me, you must, right?
I saw a citation, provide access to more than 150 lots.
So how many lots would New Taylor Lane provide access to?
Well, there's...
Inclusive of, this development is 242?
Yeah, these are units, not lots.
I think, but wouldn't you agree that that's what they mean?
I don't know, I mean, are they talking about, I think they're talking about single-family lots. And...
So if you had a condo development that was 1,000 units on one lot, that's one lot?
Well, that would... that would
Can we
pick up...
agree that the fair assumption of that is units meaning lots, meaning it's all equivalent?
I mean, I really don't know. I don't know what the intent is.
Well, how many do you know, how many lots are in the Devonshire, I don't know what the name of that subdivision is called, but how many lots are in it?
There's roughly 250.
And how many units are proposed in this development?
Yeah, 245.
So roughly 500.
Units, yes.
Units plus lots.
Right,
And units, 500 is in excess of 150.
yes. Now, I guess to continue that point, this Taylor Lane is not the sole means of access for all those units, so I guess you would split that over Cherry Tree Lane and 35 and Cherry Tree Lane and Kings Highway. There's 3 ways in now, because I also looked at those numbers as well.
Right. So how many would it be the main access for?
I don't know, I just...
If you're going to divide it, you have to give us a number.
Yeah, well, you know, he said 40% of it or something like that.
So 40% of the 250?
Up to 500, say.
But wouldn't you agree that almost all of the testimony in your traffic report contemplates that for DOT purposes, that all the traffic coming in and out of your development, the new traffic, would go out to the highway? I know that some of it might go the other way, but for your DOT analysis, you presume worst case scenario, all going out to the highway, right?
Right, but in reality, we assumed about 25% based on the function that Cherry Tree Lane serves access in Kings. About 25% would probably migrate to Kings.
But those 25%, if you're leaving this development, would still be traveling on Taylor Lane, just in a different direction.
Correct.
Okay. So all of the trips coming out of your development would be on the new Taylor Lane.
One end or the other, yes.
So that's 242 units served by New Taylor Lane. Right, your development.
45, yes.
And roughly of the 250 that exist out there now as single-family homes, what percentage of that 250 would be utilizing Taylor Lane as compared to the extension of Cherry Tree and going out to Kings Highway? Do you have a
I
breakdown
didn't
of that?
run that number, but I guess if you looked at daily count for the single-family lots, you know, their daily count is on the order of 2,300, 2,400. And if you just, I mean, I don't know how you would, you get 800 of that is on Taylor now, so a third of it.
Mr.
We
Schmidt?
have nothing further, Mr. Troutman. Our next witness is Paul Phillips.
Let's go on. Next witness.
And as Mr. Phillips has said, he was sworn, he's the applicant's planner, and he's a professional planner in the state of New Jersey, and previously sworn in the name of the borough.
Paul, you also were here for the hearings of some or most of the hearings, is that correct?
Yes,
And in particular, were you here for the last hearing when Mr. Gazarovski presented his objector case, and the witnesses, Mr. Warnia and Mr. Stack?
I was.
And did you have an opportunity to review the transcript of that hearing?
I have.
And you're familiar, obviously, with the issue we're now debating, the classification of Taylor Lane, whether it's Collector Street or local street?
Yes,
And you have had the opportunity to make a study of that and draw some conclusions?
I have.
Could you give us the benefit of that?
Yeah. I'd like to just briefly, and I hope succinctly, respond to what was raised by both Mr. Warner and Mr. Steck regarding the roadway classification question, and again, as it specifically relates to Taylor Lane.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips is being questioned, of course, is that, I will specifically preclude from asking the questions about the roadway classification. How many now, as a planner, talking about roadway classification, we have to testify in this job?
You know, I think we're getting the horse from the cart. I mean, some of the, whether it's in an area of expertise for the planner to testify to, I think we have to wait and find out what the questions and answers are. I mean,
I
and you
agree.
can object to any questions that he asks.
All objecting is asking a question dealing with roadway classification.
Well, I mean, this isn't a court. So I think you have to leave there has to be some leeway here, asking questions, and if you think that it's beyond his professional expertise, then we'll deal with it.
I think I agree, Mr. Gorman. Let's have Mr. Phillips testify and see where it goes. I will just state that I have no objection, for example, to Mr. Greenspan testifying as to what's in the master plan and how roads are
I
classified.
concur with your statement. Let's proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you would, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just, again, preface my comments by reminding the board that the issue in dispute is whether or not the minimum required setback from Taylor Lane should be 10 feet or 50 feet. That's really the issue here with regard to the roadway classification. Remember, the RMF3 zoning stipulates that the minimum required setback to an arterial or collector roadway be 50 feet, while the minimum required setback to any other public right-of-way be 10 feet. Now, your zoning ordinance is quite clear as to how a collector road is defined. If you look up the definition section in your ordinance, which is section 16-2.5, it defines a collector street or road as a roadway so designated under circulation element of the master plan. That's clear. Now, I believe I'm not misrepresenting the testimony, but I think all of the experts acknowledge that under the current circulation element of the master plan, Taylor Lane is classified as a local street. Under the current classification, it's not expressly listed under any of the other street designations. As such, if you follow the directives of your ordinance and take a literal reading interpretation of your master plan, that Taylor Lane is very clearly a local street, subject to the minimum 10-foot setback, not the 50-foot setback. Now, clearly what Mr. Litwanier and Mr. Steck are alleging is that after this is the development is built, after the roadway improvements are put in place, after additional traffic is put on this roadway, that would change the functional classification of Taylor Lane to something other than a local street. I basically have two responses to that. First, the Middletown Planning Board has had every opportunity since 2004 to amend the circulation element of the master plan to reclassify Taylor Lane, if it considered it appropriate to do so. As Mr. Greenspan went through the history, I also have gone through the history of the master plan amendments and reexaminations. There have been a number since 2004, including a 2009 amendment that specifically recommended that the zoning designation of this property be changed to allow for the very development type and density that's been proposed as part of this application. I would further point out that when the planning board amended the housing element and fair share plan in December of 2008, it not only specifically included this property as an inclusionary housing site, but it expressly stated, and I quote, "Any development of this site will necessitate the realignment of Taylor Lane consistent with the circulation element of the master plan." What's more, in 2011, as Mr. Greenspan stated earlier, this board undertook a master plan reexamination and amendment. In that document, you made a specific recommendation with regard to circulation element updates in response to changed traffic initiatives and policies since 2004. Yet, nowhere is there any reference in that document to a reclassification of Taylor Lane. And I might add that by 2011, it had been, I think, almost 2 years since this property had been rezoned. The rezoning, I think Mr. Greenspan is correct, occurred in 2009, and the land use amendment, which basically predated the rezoning, was adopted in 2009. So I think it would have been obviously known by the planning board that this site is going to be developed for hundreds of new dwelling units, and that as part of that development, Taylor Lane was going to be upgraded and realigned, again, consistent with the 2004 circulation element of the master plan. Yet the planning board saw no reason to reclassify the street to something other than a local road. My second point, I had the opportunity to review the transcripts from the hearing where Mr. Warnier testified. The last year, I was also here at that hearing to hear his testimony. And he referred to a number of sources, including AASHTO and RSIS. You've heard some of that testimony this evening. There were some other sources. Let me just point out that there's no reference to any of these documents in the portion of the circulation element of the master plan that deals with roadway classification. And by the way, Mr. Warnier, I basically indicated to you that RSIS has a definition for a local street. It does not have a definition for a local street. And in fact, as I think Mr. Gorman pointed out earlier, RSIS street classifications are different from the Middletown Master Plan street classification. What I think is material about Mr. Warnier's testimony is that he did indicate that he looked at the roadway classifications in the Middletown Master Plan. He further cited master plan language which states that some local streets serve as local collectors. He went on to say that Taylor Lane doesn't function as a local collector now, but that if Taylor Lane is reconstructed consistent with this project, it will then function as a local collector street. Well, guess what? In classifying local collector streets, the circulation element of your master plan places them under the heading of local streets, not collector streets, local streets. Incidentally, in the page in the master plan that Mr. Warnier cited in his testimony, he cited page 23 in his testimony. And the quotation from which he cites comes directly below the bold heading entitled Local Streets, not Collector Streets, which is on page 22, the previous page of your master plan. In other words, your master plan classifies a local collector street, which is what Mr. Warnier says this will function as. After this development is built, your master plan classifies that as a local street, not a collector street. So I think the bottom line is, for setback compliance purposes, I don't see any circumstances where even an improved Taylor Lane can be classified as anything other than a local street consistent with your master plan, even when you accept the testimony of the objector's experts. Two final points. First is that notwithstanding the minimum 10-foot setback requirement for a local roadway in this zone, the applicant felt it appropriate to basically increase the setback by 2.5 times the minimum that's required. 25-foot setback is proposed where 10 feet is permitted. And secondly, I, at least as a professional planner, find it compelling that neither of the board's professionals indicated that there was any variance condition associated with the proposed 25-foot setback from Taylor Lane, which would be the case if Taylor Lane were to function as anything other than a local street or a local collector street as classified in your master plan.
Thank you, Paul. Nothing further, Mr. Phillips.
Jason, I just one quick question. I'd be interested in your comments regarding the inference that planning board had 2 years to reclassify a potentially revised Taylor Lane and failed to act.
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily failed to act. There is the recommendation from 2011 about the circulation element being in need of a revision or an update. It does cite examples, but they're not necessarily the final list. There were items that were perhaps obvious at that time, but a comprehensive re-examination of the circulation element and a comprehensive update of it would take into account much more than what's listed in here. So this is not the final list that we would deal with if we had a chance to get to the circulation.
Any other questions, folks?
Can you clarify, you made a representation or statement that under the master plan, a local collector is a local street?
Correct.
What page or citation is that, master?
23.
Page 23?
From the 2004. Second paragraph under the bold heading local streets, which is actually quoted by Mr. Bukwani.
And was
Some local streets serve as, quote, local collectors, end quote. And he equated Taylor Lane after this development is constructed and the traffic is generated on Taylor Lane as a local collector, which, as I read your master plan, comes under the purview of a local street. I think that's really can't be disputed.
Is that, okay. Could you read that again? Some could be local collector?
Some local streets serve as local collectors. As I understand the testimony, both by Mr. Troutman, the applicant's expert, and Mr. Bukwani, Taylor Lane will function as a local collector, which again comes under the heading of local street in your master plan.
But within the RMF3 zoning regulations, it says local street for 10 feet and collector 50.
Correct. And
And
again,
it doesn't say, so you're saying that that's not ambiguous?
oh, I don't think it's really disputed. It's clear that this reference to local collectors comes under the heading of local streets. I don't think it could be clearer. Just look at page 23.
Any other questions? Grace Witness? Judge Rossi?
Mr. Phillips, would you agree with me that both the objector's expert as well as the applicant's expert both agree that the proposed traffic will be utilizing New Taylor Lane will be approximately 2,400 to 2,500 cars?
What I heard, I don't want to nitpick, but I heard between 2,300 and 2,400 cars.
Now, to your knowledge, is there a definition in the master plan as to what the maximum permitted traffic trips per day would be permissible for a local street?
No.
With regard to the master plan, that we've gone through this at the last hearing, basically what is in the master plan, these are recommendations, are they not?
No, they're street classifications. They're more than recommendations. They're the classification of the streets.
Assuming that to be true, when those streets were classified, what was the date of that classification?
2004.
Now, in 2004, the only existing Taylor Lane was in fact what we now refer to as Old Taylor Lane. Is that not so?
I'm not quite sure what we're referring to as Old Taylor Lane, but there,
Let me clarify that. We're talking here about two Taylor Lanes. Old Taylor Lane would be the existing Taylor Lane.
there's an existing Taylor Lane, and then there
What do you
is...
call existing Taylor Lane?
Existing Taylor Lane.
Existing Taylor Lane and proposed Taylor Lane.
Correct.
Okay. In 2004, the only roadway that was there known as Taylor Lane was existing Taylor Lane.
Obviously.
So, what in fact was a reference to, and would you agree, that based upon the traffic counts, which both parties agreed to, as to the traffic on existing Taylor Lane, it was in fact a local road?
I would agree with that testimony.
In 2004, the ordinance, which is the subject matter of this application, was not even in existence, was it?
No, but the property was zoned for another use in 2004.
Well, it wasn't in existence, was it?
The property was zoned, but this particular zoning wasn't in place. There was another zoning in place.
You know what the zoning was in 2004?
I know the previous zoning, there was another multifamily zoning, and I think before that there was a commercial zoning. So it was one or the other, but the property was zoned for development in 2004.
Now, we know that there is a reference in the master plan to, if in fact the property is developed, there must be a revision and the creation of a new or proposed Taylor Lane, correct?
There's a master plan recommendation that Taylor Lane be upgraded and realigned.
Is there anything in the master plan which states that the proposed or new Taylor Lane will be either a local road or a collector road?
In the master plan, there's no. The only reference to Taylor Lane is with regard to the proposed improvements, which I just described. There's no other mention of Taylor Lane under any of the other roadway classifications, and the master plan that goes on to say basically everything else is a local street.
Now, would it not be then appropriate to say that since it does not classify or attempt to classify what will be new Taylor Lane or proposed Taylor Lane, that the reality of the situation, the reality of the traffic counts is what must be the dominating factor in determining whether it's a local road or a collector road?
Not necessarily, no.
Well, how else could you do it?
Based on I take a literal reading of the zoning ordinance. It refers to the master plan classification system. The master plan classification does not classify Taylor Lane as anything other than a local road.
It does not classify Old Taylor Lane.
Old, new. There's a reference to Taylor Lane. It doesn't distinguish between old and new. It references Taylor Lane needing upgrade, period.
I just want to read one thing. I want to read from the transcript, I believe in the public hearing on page 64. The morning was being examined. Let me start perhaps further up on page 64 with line 7. Mr. Lithuania states, do you have a copy of that transcript? I haven't read it. I have looked at the master plan in the section on page 23. It says, if I can quote it, some local streets serve as local collectors, period. While not included in the federal functional classification system, local collectors often serve a dual function of property access and traffic collection. Local collectors often serve as through streets in major subdivisions and planned developments and should have enhanced right-of-way widths that reflect this role. It is recommended that the additional right-of-way be utilized to promote the boulevard design along those local collectors in this quote. Question is then posed to Mr. Lithuania. How does that comport with the proposed plan? His answer is, basically, some of the local streets act as collectors. That is what this does. It acts as a collector. I mean, that's what he stated, did he not?
And again, what he stated was he quoted page 23 of the master plan under the heading local streets, and he actually quoted, you just read it, some local streets service local collectors. It comes under the umbrella of local streets.
Where does it say it comes under the umbrella of local streets? In this document here.
If you look at page 23 of the master plan, it couldn't be clearer.
Let's go back a step. You testified that Mr. Litwarnian stated this was a local collector road. Now, the fact of the matter is that on page 64, he was reading from the master plan, and then when posed with a question, how does that comport with the proposed plan, he said it acts as a collector. He doesn't say it acts as a local collector, he doesn't say it acts as a minor collector, he says it acts as a collector, does he not?
Well, he doesn't make it, in what you just read, he just simply quotes the master plan language that you and I just cited. Some local streets service local collectors. That's his answer. He's citing the section of the master plan that I previously referenced under the heading of local streets.
I don't know, does not the language say it acts as a collector?
He quotes...
Now, does it say that or doesn't it? It's at line 23 and 24 on page 64. Doesn't it say it acts as a collector? Now,
It says it serves as a local... It says it serves as a local...
Hey, guys, one at a time.
It says that some local streets, and I quote, serve as local collectors.
That's what the master plan says, correct?
And that's what he cited in the transcripts that we're reading.
He says,
One at a time.
he says in lines 23 and 24, it acts as a collector. Now, you may want to, maybe you have greater powers where you can opine what you think he was meaning, but doesn't he say it acts as a collector?
He does.
Thank you. No further questions.
May I ask, did you look at 16641 in the ordinance? Mr. Troutman referred to.
Yeah, I had an occasion to look at that.
And within that definition, within that section, it says, in any development, it shall be the duty of the municipal agency to approve classification of proposed streets according to their use in accordance with the federal classification of roadways, making decisions. It goes on, it says, talk about the master plan, the Monmouth County Planning Board classification, consider conditions within the development, surrounding areas, and shall use as a guide the street classification and criteria contained therein. Below that, it says, a collector street is generally a street gathering traffic from local streets and feeding it into a system of arterial highways. Next subparagraph. Even if laid out as a local street, a street should be considered a collector street if it provides access or could provide access to more than 150 lots or would be utilized by traffic other than residential in nature. So, I mean, did you have an opportunity to look?
Here's the dilemma.
I didn't ask for a speech. I didn't ask you a question.
Well, you asked me if I read the section. I have.
Don't be argumentative, please. I just said, that's what it said. Did you review that?
I did.
Okay. So, under that particular provision, the ordinance says that as a guide, if it's more than 150 lots, it can be deemed a collector street. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it, but if you would let me...
And you want to say, well, go ahead. Now you can make a speech.
16641, the very first statement under street design and construction, there's an A. And it says, all major and minor arterial collector, local and marginal access streets shall be designed in accordance with the proposals of the master plan. So this clearly dovetails the master plan because it makes the same distinction between a collector, local collector, and local, as the master plan does. Then, Mr. Gorman, you go to the section that you referenced.
Right.
There's only collector and local. So where's the local collector fit in? That's the problem.
So as a board, we were talking about voting on this. Do we have to make a decision on this? Because we're talking about semantics here.
Well, I think we're not at that stage, but ultimately, yes.
Ultimately, it's going to be that way.
I think the master plan makes a very clear distinction between a collector and a local collector. I mean, we just read the language. If you go to the section, Mr. Gorman, that you referenced, for example, there is local, and then there's collector. As you heard from Mr. Troutman, the collector street should generally expect traffic of 3,000 vehicles per day. We don't need that. Has a design speed of 50 miles per hour. I don't think that that's going to be the design speed for Taylor Lane, unless I'm mistaken. So there, you know, I wouldn't say that it necessarily meets the standards of a collector street as specified in this section. I mean, there are
Would you agree that there are different indicia throughout the master plan and throughout the ordinance, they're all not consistent?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
You've done, I mean, I didn't need to prolong the examination.
No, speak to me or Mr.
No, I'm just going to point this together, I would say.
I have no questions. No further questions.
No further.
And Mr. Chairman, as promised, those are our three rebuttal witnesses, so if we want to now
So-
proceed to the public.
And again, to remind the public, it's going to be just questions to each other witness pertaining, not to all three of them.
Well, the way we set this up is that they can ask questions of those three witnesses as to their testimony this evening. And please, not comments, there's a public portion at the end of the meeting for comment, statements, and testimony. This isn't that time yet.
Okay, let's open it to the public. I have to stand. Gentlemen over here.
I have a question for Mr. Troutman.
You're going to have
Please
to
come
come
on
up
up.
be on the
You'll
record.
have this piece.
Can we hand the board lights?
Not ready yet.
My question is for Mr. Troutman.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, could you identify?
Richard
Sorry.
Plumage, 36 Devonshire Court, Taylor Lane.
Did you get his last names?
Did you spell it?
B-R-O-M, W-F-I-C-H.
Okay. Since even though I warned you, this is only for questions, but since it tends to lapse into testimony, please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about to give the board the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
I've lived on the corner of Taylor Lane and Devonshire Court for 40 years. When it was a dirt road to what it is now. I'd like to ask you, you said that the Taylor Lane would not be used as a through road. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. At the present time, all traffic coming south on 35, the easiest way to get into development is by Taylor Lane. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, that's one of the ways in.
That's the easiest way.
One of two ways.
All right. If you bypass Taylor Lane, you're left with two more choices. You can go in Cherry Tree Lane, or you can go all the way down by Sears, get on Kings Highway, then make a right turn and get in. So, based on that information, wouldn't you agree that it is much easier to turn down Taylor Lane to get into the development?
Taylor Lane or Cherry Tree Lane, yes.
All right. Your new roadway coming from Cherry Tree Farm Road across, you specified that there wouldn't be that much traffic using Taylor Lane. It wasn't really a through street, there was a lot of stop signs, a lot of congestion. What you said?
I didn't say there's a lot of congestion, I just said there's, the design of the whole internal system of that neighborhood is very curvilinear.
All right. At present time, it is impossible to go from Cherry Tree Farm Road, across the highway, and enter the Taylor Lane. So anybody wanting to use the park either has to go and make a left turn and then enter via Cherry Tree Lane. Can you agree to that?
Yes.
Okay, in the future, it is going to be a hell of a lot easier just to go right across the road and go right down Taylor Lane to the park. And in the wintertime, there isn't much traffic. But in the summertime, when all the baseball teams, all the soccer teams are playing, there is a lot of traffic that's going to be using Taylor Lane. And I don't think that when you did your estimate, I don't think you took that into account.
I'm aware of that traffic, and it's the same traffic that's in the neighborhood today, it's just taking a different route.
That's not true. Right now, nobody from that that side of the highway, from the east side of 35, they can't go across that street. They have to make a left turn and go into Cherry Tree Lane.
Right, yeah, I didn't say they could go across, but I said the same traffic that wants to get to the park is finding its way in now and will in the future just be a different route, that's all I'm saying.
A different route. But in the future, it'll be Taylor Lane that be using. Here, you drive straight across the street, down the road. Do you agree?
Yes.
All right. I think that when you get the plan, also, take everybody in that development. They're going to go to the railway station. You say it's easier to go to 35 and go down to Kings Highway.
No, I didn't.
Okay. All that traffic now that uses the railway station is going to be going down Taylor Lane to Kings Highway to the railway station. They're certainly not going to go out to face those lights on 35. They're not going to go out that way to go down to the railway station. They're going to be using Taylor Lane. Would you agree?
I already testified to that any residents in this neighborhood, this new proposed development that want to go to the train station, I believe they would go back.
So what you're doing basically with this plan is turning the local road into a thoroughfare. That's all I have to say.
That is not correct.
Anyone else make it pertinent questions? Gentleman over here with the purple sweater. Maroon.
If we could have your name, sir, for the record.
Richard Stackle?
Have you testified before this?
No, I have not.
Please raise your right hand. Swear testimony you're about to give the board the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And spell your last name, please.
S-T-A-F-F-E-L-D-T. My question is, Mr. Trevor. The existing Taylor Lane is about 4/10 of a mile off Devonshire, maybe 3 off of Brash Farms. When they put these new houses in, maybe it'll be about 1/10 of a mile to get up there to the road. And the road ends at the feed off of the turn off to go around off the Cherry Tree Lane. With this new extension with a light, it'll be coming down to a stop sign. They'll make a left on the stop sign, it'll be on Taylor Lane, about 100 feet of Taylor Lane. Why doesn't that traffic count in the traffic on Taylor Lane?
That is not Taylor Lane traffic, that's state highway jug handle traffic. It's part of
It's
the...
not on your new plan, it's not a jug handle, you're coming down to a stop sign, you look at your thing, and you're making a left.
It is a jug handle, it's a type A jug handle under the NJDOT design manual.
Young lady over here.
Have you have?
Yes, I have.
And your name, please.
Mary Stanhouse, same spelling.
Thank you. And have meaning you were a member.
Yes. I just, 2 questions. First, you said that the traffic would appreciably change once it's connected to Cherry Tree Lane. But I don't think that's true, because now anybody coming from Cherry Tree Farm Road is connected to Taylor Lane. You said that the traffic coming on to Taylor would appreciably change. Now, anyone coming across Cherry Tree Farm Road from St. Mary's or from Starbucks, anywhere on that side of 36, comes on, you cannot go across, you make a left turn. You come down, you come in by the OPES station.
You have to make a question.
What's your question?
You still say it's changing the traffic, because all of that traffic will now come straight across. It's not just for the games, it's all of us. If we are coming from Cherry Tree Farm Road, now we have to go down and come in on Cherry Tree Lane. But then we come across, so how can that not change the traffic?
I already acknowledged, first of all, the key statement is that the only traffic on Taylor is going to be people that are coming into this neighborhood already some other way, some of them maybe some other way. And I just acknowledged with the other witness, yes, by making it go straight across, those people that are turning left on 35 and then right on Cherry Tree Lane, sure, some of them could divert to Taylor Lane depending on where they live in the neighborhood. I fully
Most
acknowledge
of
that.
them, because it eliminates another traffic light.
Not to, can I, this has to be questions.
Okay.
Okay? Because if we start talking about testimony and what you think and what you feel, we're never going to get this done. So this is questions.
Okay, I have another question concerning your comment earlier. I don't understand what you were saying. I'd like you to explain how you're comparing Taylor Lane to Cherry Tree Lane, saying that it was built to discourage through traffic because it was built in a curvilineal, when in fact historically Cherry Tree Lane was not a through road. The branches were built at one end, then the splits that come in from behind on Cherry Tree Lane by the Hess station, and in fact that was the only ingress and egress for those.
Question, please.
My question is, how can you compare, why do you compare that and why do you say that it was specifically built that way to discourage through traffic when it wasn't built as a through road? They were separate developments built at different periods.
Right, and that, all I was citing is that as it was built out, the way the roads were designed to interconnect was in such the way that it was not like a straight line thoroughfare. They were designed to have curvilinear features, many different intersecting roads and turns that had to be made to get through there. If you don't know your way through there, it's not exactly the most easy thing to navigate through.
Actually, it's very simple. So did you research the history of it, of how the different developments were built?
I did not.
Because where I'm on Nottingham Way, Cherry Tree Lane and Nottingham Way, that was just a simple loop, a very common.
Okay, we're getting away from questions.
Yeah, we have to question. Pretend we're on Jeopardy.
Yeah.
It's gotta be.
We can't expound.
So do you still maintain that that was designed to discourage traffic when in fact it wasn't built as a road?
I think he's acknowledged he doesn't know the history.
Doesn't know it.
So we're just, so we have a big crowd, a lot of people, okay? He's acknowledged he doesn't know how it happened.
But you still maintain that they are of equal weight, yes?
It's a simple observation that the way Cherry Tree Lane works is that it has a curvilinear design with many intersecting streets and turns to discourage through traffic. That is the existing condition of Cherry Tree Lane. That's my statement.
I think you'd like to object.
You have an opportunity. General stipulation, we agree that everybody gets up here disagrees with it. We got it.
No, we know.
Ask them questions.
Gentlemen, way back there.
And if anybody gets up and wants to agree, you can note that. I'm just going out on a limb. You've testified, sir. I remember your face.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you just give us your name and address?
My name is Mike Lavolsi, L-I-V is in Victor, O-L-S-I. What is the current, I guess, definition of the current Taylor Lane? How's it defined?
In the master plan, as I
No, just
said,
as your first year.
no, all I testified to is that I researched the master plan and Taylor Lane is a local street and will continue to be a local street. That was my testimony.
So what is the definition in the master plan of Taylor Lane?
It was classified as a local street.
No, it's not.
Okay, again, no, not a question.
What does it say on page 28 of the master plan in regards to the definition of Taylor Lane?
I don't know.
The classification. Okay.
That's not a question.
Would you say, or would you be willing to look up and see if Taylor Lane is defined as a unimproved road?
I did not read that page.
Okay. Will you be doing that in the near future?
No.
Okay. So are you saying that what could possibly be an unimproved road, roughly 33 feet wide, as defined in the first sentence of the paragraph of the master plan, is going to meet into an ulterior road? Meaning, basically you're saying, what I'm saying, or so my question is that in the master plan, Taylor Lane is defined as an unimproved road. And I'm saying is that that's going to meet into, that you're saying that's a local road that's going to meet into an ulterior road. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I already testified. Taylor Lane in the master plan is a local street. If you want to talk about other roads it intersects Devonshire to the south, another local street. It intersects Route 35. Well, speaking of realigned Taylor now, it intersects Route 35, a principal or a primary arterial, opposite Cherry Tree Farm Road, secondary arterial. I identified all those roads, all those intersections already in my testimony.
Okay, so are you willing to admit that you might be wrong in your definition of Taylor Lane as a local road?
No,
Why not?
it's a local street in the master plan. It's page 23. It's right there.
No, how many times is Taylor Lane referenced in the master plan?
It testifies down.
You just mentioned that you read about
Who
Taylor Lane.
doesn't know?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, questions, not arguments, not statements. Sir, your name, you've been up here before. Your name, sir?
Adam Volk, V as in Victor, OEHL, 19 Devonshire Court. Hello. This evening you testified drawing parallels between Cherry Tree Lane and existing and realigned Taylor Lane. My question is, at the terminus of Route 35 at Cherry Tree Lane, what type of intersection would you consider that to be?
Right in, right out to southbound 35.
Or what I would call a T in lay terms?
Another way to describe it, yes.
And when you made the parallel of the use, comparing Taylor Lane to Cherry Lane, what type of intersection will be the realigned Taylor Lane?
Taylor Lane intersecting 35 will be a signalized intersection.
Okay, is that a T type of intersection?
It's a four-way.
Four-way. So would you agree that drawing parallels between Cherry Tree Lane and Taylor Lane would differ because they have two different distinct intersections?
That wasn't the parallel I was trying to draw. We actually discussed it with some of the earlier questions. What I was trying to draw was that Cherry Tree Lane actually connects and goes somewhere. In other words, you can start at 35 at Cherry Tree Lane and go all the way through and end up at Kings Highway and have two roads of higher classification on either end. Taylor Lane will never do that. Taylor Lane will have higher classification on one end, but it runs into Devonshire, a local street, and does not take you to a roadway of higher classification on the other. That was the only thing I was trying to cite, and given that fact, Cherry Tree Lane is a local street, and it connects on both ends to something. That's all I was pointing at.
But given your explanation just now, where Cherry Tree Lane would feed the properties in that area and also feed out to Kings Highway, would not Taylor Lane function as that same thing because it effectively goes in the same direction and does the same thing?
It doesn't. It's not as direct. Cherry Tree Lane would be the most direct way to do it, and that's not how it's used. It's used for people with origins and destinations in the neighborhood.
Okay. When you're coming southbound on Route 35 and you're looking to enter into that neighborhood, let's say you're in the Nottingham section or even the Doris Lane section, what in your estimation would be the shortest and fastest route to get to them?
I don't know those sections. I didn't analyze that travel pattern. I testify about it.
Okay. I have another question for Mr. Phillips. Should I wait for that?
No, you can
All at one time.
Hi. You were talking about the differentiation of Taylor Lane in the master plan as being a local road and the desire in the master plan to have it realigned with Cherry Tree Farm Road, baking in the fact that this was a high-density zoning where it should have occurred to somebody that that higher density zoning would provide more travel on Taylor Lane, and thus it should have been changed in some sort of classification.
Well, no, I didn't make a value judgment. What I suggested is that the planning board had a number of opportunities post-2004 and after this property was rezoned for its current development to reclassify Taylor Lane, and for whatever reasons it chose not to.
With that in mind, with a high-density residential build-out on this property, couldn't you in fact still have ingress and egress into that neighborhood without changing the character of Taylor Lane if you entered and exited directly onto Route 35 and/or entered and exited in this proposed property directly across from Palmer, which would also be a four-way intersection?
I understand what you're describing physically, but I don't understand in what context the question is being asked.
The context in the question is, you're claiming that the town did not attempt to reclassify Taylor Lane and the use of Taylor Lane, knowing that this would be a high-density residential area and add more trips to the general vicinity. But couldn't you do that, not reclassify Taylor Lane, continue to have it to be a collector road if you just entered and exited?
It's not a collector road, it's a local street.
Pardon me? Without changing the character of Taylor Lane, by entering and exiting your proposed development directly onto Route 35, so there wouldn't be a need to reclassify Taylor Lane.
Well, if I understand what you're saying correctly, I think you're getting into issues as to where the traffic that's generated to this development is basically going to arrive from and where it's going to leave from, and whether or not it's going to go right to 35 or whether it's going to potentially go in the opposite direction on Taylor Lane. Is that what you're saying? And would that have resulted in some kind of reclassification?
That's not what I'm saying.
Can I make a suggestion? If you don't understand the question, you say, I don't understand the question.
I said that the first time, but I'm trying.
You're trying to be responsive. I understand, you're trying to be responsive. If you don't understand, we're going back and forth. Ask the question in a way that you can answer it, and just, if you can't answer, say, I don't understand, or please rephrase it.
My question is, you make the assumption that Taylor Lane, or its improvement or its redesignation, was overlooked by the master plan, because no mention of it was made that it should be increased in size or reclassified.
I'm not, just for the record, I'm not saying it was overlooked or not overlooked. What I'm saying is that the planning board had the opportunity to change the designation over the last 9 years from a local street to something else, and it did not.
Okay. With that in mind, if you entered and exited your proposed property from a different source other than Taylor Lane, wouldn't Taylor Lane still remain in its same character and not have to be changed?
I don't know. I mean, we're getting into site plan and access issues. I can't answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else gentlemen back there?
Have you testified so far?
No.
Please, your name and address, please.
James Goodstein,
Spell your last name?
Goodstein.
Please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about to give the board the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And with the warning of, we really don't question testimony.
Yes, absolutely.
Who do you wish to question?
The first gentleman, I didn't get his name, that was the expert about the numbers. Yes, sir. Thanks. Just a couple quick ones that I thought were important. The numbers that you gave were about numbers of cars, right? Numbers of cars that might be added. And my question was, do we have any information on peak hours? Because I think that's peak hours. You know, shopping and things like that.
Not to be, we do. He testified to it extensively before.
Okay.
So we do have that.
Okay, and so in your opinion, during those hours, would that be like more of a crunch time?
Tonight's discussion
It's only on the testimonies for today.
purely roadway classification, which
Okay.
deals with average daily traffic. So all those numbers were geared towards daily volume and roadway classification.
And the numbers that you got were from a book, really, of standards and things like that. In your professional opinion, would it make more sense to have actual
I've seen them on the road before, guys doing clicking or machines that actually count cars so that we can get real-time data. Would that make us,
That was all done.
oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Also, the other question that I had was, and I apologize if I don't know things of the past, but trying to catch up. It seems like, would it be a better way, in your opinion, to build, to do this study first and then have a plan to build? Or is it common that you just say, okay, here's my plan, these are the number of units I want to build, and then find out later that it's going to be a traffic jam? What I'm saying is, was there due diligence done to first figure out how many cars can fit on the road before you did the plan?
We already did all that.
All of that was done? Okay, all right.
Major roadway improvement that was tested.
Okay, thanks, guys.
For the record, and I know it's a long time ago, but last February, the past February, the past March, Mr. Troutman testified for a few hours about it.
Okay, all right, thanks, guys, apologies, thank you.
That's okay, I understand.
Anyone else? Young lady over here? Right?
Could you give us your name? Your name and address, please?
My name is Carolyn Heck. I live at 19 Downing Court.
And have you?
Yes.
You have? Okay.
Yes. I don't know which gentleman testified to this, but when they were talking about the collector roads and the definition of the local collector road versus the collector road, one of the things they said that would classify a road as a collector road is that you would need to be going 50 miles per hour. Is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry,
There's in the section.
Wait. First of all, you direct your question to Mr. Troutman?
I think it was me.
I believe it was this gentleman.
Okay. Just for the record, within the ordinance section 16641, it lists several criteria. One of them is whether or not it should be a design speed of 50, not a speed limit, a design speed.
Correct.
Okay, what is the difference of that? That
Well,
people can go 50 miles per hour?
That's what our ordinance says. And that's all that Mr. Phillips testified.
I just cited in the ordinance some of the references to what would be considered a collector street, one of which is the average daily traffic volume, and the other is the design speed of the roadway, which in your ordinance it has 50 miles per hour.
Right, and then you made a statement that Taylor Lane would never have a designation of 50 miles per hour?
Well, what I made a statement is that it's, and there's probably better people to answer this, but it's my understanding that the speed limit on Taylor Lane will not be 50 miles per hour after this development is built. But he's really the expert on that, but that's my understanding.
That's correct, yeah, the speed limit on Taylor Lane would not be 50 miles an hour.
Okay, so based upon that, that wouldn't be a collector road at any point in time?
That's one provision that would show you that it's not a collector street. It doesn't meet that criteria.
Okay, so then across the way, we have Cherry Tree Farm Road, which somebody stated had a higher designation, traffic designation,
Yes, it's a secondary arterial.
which means it has more traffic on it, people go faster, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
But Cherry Tree Farm Road does not have a speed limit or a speed designation, whatever you want to call it, of 50 miles per hour. So I guess my point is that just because Taylor Lane is not going to be going 50 miles per hour, it doesn't mean that it is not going to be a collector road.
No, it just means it doesn't meet that characteristic of a collector road.
One of them.
Right.
Okay, I also have an issue, and it wasn't exactly brought up here tonight, but it has to do with the realignment.
Questions now, so you'll have an opportunity to.
Okay, so it has to do with the realignment of Taylor Lane and potential linear construction projects that would be at another time?
Tonight's only questions of these witnesses as to what they said tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Did you previously?
I have not.
Okay, please give us your name and your address, please.
Richard Wedinger, W-E-D-I-N-G-E-R, address 11 Devonshire Court.
Please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about to be the board's truth, whole truth, none but there's something else. And questions, please.
Yes, Mr. Trout, I actually have a couple of questions. What just ended was talk about the design speed of a collector street being 50 miles an hour. And I think that you said that this is one reason why Taylor is not going to be a collector street because it's not going to be 50 miles an hour. Is that correct?
That's one of the characteristics you might find on a collector street that Taylor does not meet.
Okay, well, let's go into 16641 because we talked about it. Is there anything in that statute which requires the speed of a collector street to be 50 miles an hour?
Not that I know of, it's a characteristic.
And in fact, the point which was cited by you, or somebody, was the design speed for site triangle purposes, not the design speed that it should be. Isn't that correct?
I'll just cite the phrase. It says, the design speed of collector streets for alignment and site distance purposes should be 50 miles per hour.
So that's to design it, not saying that's what the speed's going to be.
Yes.
And in fact, the design or the actual speed limit on the collector streets that you pointed out, you know what their speed limits are?
I did not do a speed survey of those. What I would say though is if you're designing a street for alignment and site distance purposes for 50 miles an hour, that to me insinuates traffic volume, through traffic volume.
That's exactly right. It insinuates traffic volume, people coming down. And let's go through 16641 since it's been brought up. Okay, let's start with local streets because nobody talked about that. And you have it in front of you, is that right? If
Yes.
you don't, I have it with me. You have a chance?
Yes, I have it from me.
Okay, so let's start with local streets. Local streets serve only single-family residences, and where feasible, should be either a cul-de-sac or loop street, meeting a requirement henceforth set forth. Is that correct? Did I read that right?
Yes.
Okay. So does this development serves non-local streets? Isn't that correct? Non-single-family residences. There's a park.
Yes.
There's a school that people are going to. At the end, on Kings Highway, right? Second, a street which serves traffic having origins and destinations other than within the lots about which abut the street shall not be considered a local street. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Okay. So now, me personally, I live on Devonshire. I'm going to want to go to Starbucks. I'm going through Taylor Lane. I'm going to be going to some place that is not a residence, and I'm going to be coming back through Cherry Tree Lane. So, by definition, the Middletown Township definition, that's not a local street, am I right?
Yeah, that's where it morphs into the local collector, that dual function local collector within the definition of local streets. They say that some local streets have that dual function of a local collector.
Right, so we'll talk about that.
I mean, that's what I talked about.
It's certainly, New Taylor Lane is not a local street. Absolutely, unequivocally correct, right?
The new Taylor Lane is a local street as defined in the master plan, as I testified to.
No. regulations are what give the township the right to create the master plan. Isn't that correct?
I'm going to answer that, that's not correct.
Legally, that's not correct.
All right. Now, let's go through the last definition of a local street. Traffic normally expected on a local street shall be 400 vehicles per day. Isn't that what it says?
Yes.
Now, is it even using your number of 2,300? Isn't that a whole lot closer to a collector street than the 400 of a local street?
As I already testified, Taylor Lane and Cherry Tree Lane are local collectors as defined under the local streets category in the master plan. They are not local streets as defined in these parameters.
Let's go one step further. They're not local streets, and they're a whole lot closer to a collector street under these definitions.
They are a local collector under the local street category.
That's your opinion.
Okay, I'm asking the question. Under these definitions in 16641, wouldn't you agree that it's a whole lot closer to a collector street than it is to a local street? I mean, it's simple. 2,300 is a lot closer to 3,000 than it is to 400.
That is not correct.
I don't mean to be, and I realize everybody wants to get up, and you're doing a fine job. I understand your cross-examination. But their planner admitted that there are ambiguous or contradictory indications within these documents. We're kind of gilding the lily here a little bit. So I understand everyone wants to get up and make their own point again. I got it. And I realize that what you're doing, and I'm not, but if we do this 20 more times, we just put more gild on the lily, okay?
The board has to ferret this out. We understand where you're coming from.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Let me just ask you one other question. I think, you said that 25% of the development, your new development, is going to go up Cherry Tree Lane or up Taylor Lane onto Devonshire or something. Why are they going?
I did not say that. The development will primarily be oriented to the north on Taylor Lane towards 35. If you model what attracts trips, commercial uses, places of work, that type of stuff, a majority of traffic from this development will find it most convenient to go in and out of their units via 35 at Realign Taylor. However, there is a minority portion. For example, if you want to take your kid to school, or if you want to go to the train station, that will use Cherry Tree Lane to Kings Highway. So some will distribute in each direction, the majority being to 35.
Just for convenience, they'll go the other way. 25% is your estimate, 375 or so.
I said up to 25% could possibly go out to Kings, again, based on their destinations. It may be 80-20, 75-25, something like that.
Why do you think nobody in their calculations is going to go from Starbucks up that way as a means of convenience?
I don't understand that question. Starbucks to where?
Well, you got the new redesigned Taylor Lane, which is going to connect to Cherry Tree Farm Road. You found in your calculations that nobody is going to come from that direction into the Taylor Lane development and through the other way, out to Kings Highway. If 25% of your people are going to go through there, why is nobody that's just right across 35 going to go there?
Because if you do a travel time analysis, there's no time incentive to coming across into this neighborhood to get out the other end. The time incentive is not even close.
Where is the travel time analysis that you did for that?
Again, Mr. Troutman was here February 20th, March 20th, and October, whatever date. He went through a lot of this.
I understand.
Let me finish. We cannot, and it's not proper to go back over all that again tonight. He talked about all those things. There were a lot of questions about that. And it was his opinion then, and I'm paraphrasing it, basically, what he just said. Those cars entering, from going from Starbucks, going to the train station, are going to 135. Not for this development. And he's not going to change his opinion, and besides, it's not part of the cross-examination of tonight's testimony.
And I understand the ruling, and I'm going to step back because of it. However, he did say tonight, when he used Cherry Tree Lane as an example, he said, nobody now goes up Cherry Tree Lane. And I just want to make it, that's what he said. He said, nobody uses that. I want to make it clear that he didn't do any studies then of Devonshire and Taylor.
Are you asking him?
Are you asking this question?
Well, no, Mr. Gorman stopped me because he said this all went over. I just wanted on the record that those studies were not done. So
Well,
I-
how do you ask him if he did them?
At the end of this, you will have a chance.
And he gave his opinion. Did he do a study? I think the record would reflect that he did not.
Okay, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Anyone over here with the last question?
Sir, have you been up before in this application?
I have indeed. Leo Decker, 9 Village Lane?
Decker?
Yes, D-E-C-K-E-R. D-E-C-K-E-R.
William.
Leo.
Leo, sorry. And an element.
With regards to the map that was introduced tonight, I can't see it from the back. Can you tell me where Cherry Tree Farm Road originates on the southbound side? Assuming that Starbucks end is the northbound side?
Cherry Tree Farm or Cherry Tree Lane?
Starbucks would be the southern terminus. Correct.
Well, in the north.
Yeah. Where does it go to?
Cherry Tree Farm Road begins at the west at 35, where Taylor's going to be realigned, and basically is an east-west road. It's a Monmouth County road designated as Route 516. It changes at the Church, Leonardville, Monmouth Road intersection, and that would basically be where it leads on the east end. Tyndall Road comes in from the south.
Okay. And my question actually is anybody who lives in this area really considers Tyndall Road, Cherry Tree Farm Road as a continuous road. There's 2 high schools that are located on those roads, and when you said before that no traffic will be coming from Cherry Tree Farm Road over to Taylor Lane, did you take into account the fact that there's 2 high schools and the quickest route to get to this development would be straight line?
You're misstating my testimony. I did not say no traffic is going to come across Cherry Tree Farm Road to Taylor Lane. I said that only traffic with origins and destinations in these neighborhoods will cross back and forth.
Well, does Tyndall Road have the same classification as Cherry Tree Farm Road? My question really is how does the designation of these roads change when they're actually one continuous thoroughfare?
It doesn't change. It's the same. It's a secondary arterial.
So Tyndall Road is the same classification as Cherry Tree Farm Road,
Correct.
but the classification changes when you cross the highway to Taylor Lane.
And the function dramatically, yes.
That makes no sense to me,
You
but.
can bring it up later.
Thank you.
Where you want to come up again?
You've been up before, Mr. Bennett, right? That's his first name?
28 Birch Drive. I have one question. I think Mr. Phillips is what happened about. You stated that the township had time to reclassify the road. You know that this was multifamily dwellings to be put in, and then we had the board had time to change the designation of the road. And I think you'd be adamant about its statement, because it's in the master plan now as an ordinary road, that we shouldn't have to change it to a collector road. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I said. And there is no such ordinary road classification.
Local road.
What I said is that, in essence, the present classification of the roadway is a local street, which dates back to the 2004 master plan. What my testimony was is if the planning board felt at any time between 2004 and today, essentially, if there was any need to change that designation for whatever reason, a change in zoning, a change in traffic volumes in the area that were anticipated on this roadway, they had every opportunity to do so, and particularly in light of the fact that there were several master plan amendments and re-examination reports over that intervening period between 2004 and the present, and they chose not to change that classification. That was my point.
But is the current, no matter what goes in there, because they haven't changed anything since the master plan, is your contention then that it is, no matter what, because they haven't changed it up until now, that it will never be a collector road until after this goes in and you see more volume?
Well, I'm not of the opinion that after this goes in, it's going to have to be upgraded to anything other than a local street. And I say that with my understanding and reading of the master plan that local collector streets come under the umbrella of a local street in the master plan. So what we've heard from the experts, I think, on both sides is that even after this development is built, it will basically function as a local collector street. My testimony is that comes under the umbrella of local street in the master plan. I don't think there would be, based on that testimony, a need to change that classification. You're welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to have maybe two more. Sir, over here.
Now I remember, excuse me, sir, you've been up before,
Yes,
right?
I have.
And your name, please?
My name is Michael Mallory, 11 Canterbury Court.
You don't have to be sworn, no. You can go.
You testified that that there's a percentage of traffic that Cherry Tree Lane can assume. What was that percentage of traffic that you indicated? Cherry Tree Lane from those people going to schools and to the train station during peak times?
Well, I testified that from the development of the development traffic, up to 25% of it during peak hours would go south on Taylor to Cherry Tree Lane to Kings Highway versus going north on Taylor to 35.
So your expert opinion, what is the level of traffic that could be sustained for Cherry Tree Lane in peak periods based on that 25%? Would you indicate that it can accept that level of traffic?
Yes, I did in previous hearings.
Yeah, well, you talked about it tonight, so you opened up the door, and I'd like to understand. You said 25%. I'd like to know if we can assume that level of traffic from there, and I'd like to know what the threshold would be.
As Mr. Gorman's ruled before, it goes beyond what we've done tonight. Tonight, we've given rebuttal testimony on a very limited issue.
This gentleman indicated that there's a percentage, 25%. I want to know if we could handle that 25% that he indicated today.
He's not going to answer the question. It's been answered, as Mr. Gorman has said many times, months ago.
The problem that I have, and I'm still speaking, sir. I'm still speaking, sir.
And I was speaking as well, and I'll let you speak in a moment. He did give testimony as to particular issues tonight. We dealt with issues of whether Taylor Lane should be classified by this board as a local collector. But we're going to start getting into traffic distributions. That was something covered long ago.
He opened the door tonight. Now it's my turn. Excuse me, sir.
No, I think the chair has.
I think we understand where you're coming from.
No, I haven't finished yet, so how could you possibly? I'm concerned about this is an expert here, and I think it was reckless for him to not include the traffic that's coming across Route 35 from Cherry Tree Farm Lane. I don't believe that we could adequately sustain that level of traffic.
I understand where you're coming from, and I'd like you to stand down. You can't present this at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
The whole concept is we get narrower and narrower and narrower. The narrow focus tonight is what he said tonight. Ask questions about that, not what he said in February, not what he said in March, or what he said in October.
If there aren't any more questions, Mr. Gazarovski, this gentleman over here? Okay.
Hi, I'm Jim O'Brien. I have been previously. This one. Just on the basis of tonight's testimony, and these are just objective questions based upon your status. You're speaking as an expert?
I am, yes.
Can an expert be wrong?
Of course.
Have there been cases where either defendants or one side of a suit hires experts for the purpose of kind of building their case?
Okay. I mean, you know what? It's stipulated. He's their witness. He's trying to help their case. He's a professional engineer, qualified as a traffic engineer. We understand. The board understands. He's their witness. We got that. Sometimes people are wrong. Sometimes in their testimony, they're trying to help their applicant. We got it.
Mr. Gorman, I'm just asking a question.
But it's self-evident. The question's self-evident.
Well, you say it's self-evident. I want it on the record. Is that a problem?
This is the time to question him on his testimony, not to voir dire him. This is the time to question him on his testimony.
Experts can be wrong, you said that.
It's stipulated.
You'll have an opportunity to make a record at the end.
Fair enough. Experts are hired based upon their expertise.
Yes, it's stipulated.
And you won't allow me to ask any other questions in regards to expertise and his status as an expert at this time?
No.
It's beyond the scope.
That was February 2013.
My case is closed.
Looking at it, Mr. Gazarovski, do you have any questions?
I just want to question.
Fine.
I promise.
You have to pick up a light someplace or go. Where's the light? Did it go here? Or you can sit, whatever, as long as you're on the microphone.
As long as it's going to be quick, I have no objection, but I believe Mr. Gazarovski will cross-examine Mr. Cutts. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, you're right. So,
I object, because we're short on time.
It's not short
on time. Well, I do object, actually.
I want to cross-examine this.
I'm sorry?
Just to follow up your question.
I don't think so.
No. I'll bring it up. We're going to have, I take it, a vote with regard to the issue of whether or not it's collected or my house. I state.
My recommendation to the board would be, if we're done taking testimony from the applicant and the objectors, then there would be public comment and then votes to be taken by the board.
Okay, I think that's where we should go right now. Any questions? Public comment on the one? I'm ready to take public comment. Any questions?
Public comment.
Okay, public comment. It's whatever you wish to speak about pertaining to this application. So we'd like to keep it short, try to keep it, try to just pertain to one base, solid subject. Gentlemen, way back here.
And not duplicative.
And can I just make sure, I just want to clarify, it's, the public's going to get, they can make a comment, it's not a question, people aren't answering.
Right.
It's-
This is
So it's
a
something
comment,
to state for the record that will be a part of this testimony and record moving forward.
That's correct.
Thank you. And to the extent possible, please recognize that other people want to speak. Please don't be repetitive. And it's not for argument, either with the applicant or with the board.
And if someone already brought the subject up, you do not have to bring it up again if it's pertaining to the same thing. Go on, sir.
That would be me. My name is James Roche. My address is 126 Cherry Tree Lane.
You were previously sworn.
Yes. Thank you, members of the planning board, for your time. I appreciate your due diligence as you move toward a decision regarding proposed development. My comments this evening are focused around traffic and, more importantly, safety. In doing some research here, I looked up in the Webster Dictionary, it defines traffic engineering as a branch of the civil engineering that uses engineering techniques to achieve the safe and efficient movement of people and goods on the roadways. It focuses mainly on research for safe and efficient traffic flow, such as road geometry, sidewalks, crosswalks, traffic signs, road surface markings, and traffic lights. My question to you, the planning board, is can you, each of you, with complete confidence, say that you are satisfied with the developer's research, traffic report, and engineering techniques necessary to achieve a safe and efficient movement of people and goods on our roadways, specifically Taylor Lane? Here's an example of their research and engineering techniques. The proposed crosswalk on Taylor Lane between the two developments will have a ladder or a crosshatch pattern that pedestrians will use as a crossing. How does this protect children, the elderly, the blind, or handicapped when crossing? Here's the next example. When I asked Mr. Troutman whether a traffic light yield sign or stop sign existed at the corner of Taylor Lane and Derbyshire Lane, his response was a stop sign. Anyone who lives in the neighborhood knows there never was a stop sign at that corner, not until recently. Is this a reflection of his research? Is this his expert testimony? Is this the expert we're relying on for a safe and efficient traffic flow? Here are some pedestrian safety related points that have not been discussed or even considered. Pedestrian crossing warning signs with flashing beacons, raised crosswalks, the use of pavement lights to alert motorists of pedestrian crossing, a yield sign for pedestrians or stop sign at the crosswalk, are the sidewalks passable by people using wheelchairs, walkers, and strollers? Are the curb ramps 2 per corner where practical? Do the ramps comply with the American Disabilities Association specifications? Is there a push button or an activated pedestrian traffic signal? Does it have a locator tone for people who are blind? Is the button located within reach of a wheelchair user or child? Are pedestrian signs easy to understand and interpret? I ask again, can each of you say with complete confidence that you are satisfied with the research and the engineering techniques necessary to achieve an efficient movement of people and goods on our roadways? How do we safeguard our community, the elderly, the handicapped, and our children from hazardous conditions that will come with this development? The planning board must vote no. Thank you.
Have you been sworn in before?
Yes.
Joanne Jones.
Joanne Jones?
If you can't hear me, hold up your hand. I don't think I need this.
It's okay.
I said that.
Use the microphone. Use the
We
microphone.
need it for the
It's
recording.
recorded.
They can hear me anyway, can't you?
It has to be, ma'am, it has to be recorded.
This is the
You'd be so
perfect
kind.
time for me to speak because the gentleman that just left, I have to confess, I'm responsible for that stop sign at the end of Taylor. I've lived here 42 years on Devonshire Court. One night before the storm in September a year ago, saying, I could see out my door and the traffic was flying on Devonshire. I started counting while I was watching TV, 170 cars in 1 hour. The next day, I counted from 5 to 6 first, and then 6 to 7. They're all, in 3 hours, there were about 400 cars on Devonshire. Some of them were speed. I think I'm an advocate of sorts. So I went to see Lieutenant McGuire, I think his name was, the safety director. I met with him, he was very nice. I told him I was concerned about the safety because a lot of people walk their dogs, older people walk in the neighborhood. He put a counter up. He said, is there more traffic from Taylor to Cherry Tree Lane or the other way? I said, well, I think it maybe is about 50-50. He said, I'll put the counter up from Cherry Tree Lane to Taylor. And then in a month or so, I will do it the other way. I said, we don't have a 25-mile speed limit sign on Devonshire. He did get that up too. And we had the counter, I don't know because I've missed a lot of meetings, whether anybody brought that up, that there is a counter for the traffic on Devonshire. So my question, one question is, did anybody see those figures of the traffic on Taylor at one point, Cherry Tree another point, and then last year on Devonshire? Anybody that lives on Devonshire and Cherry Tree Lane know how dangerous it is too, besides the danger on Taylor Lane. There is a lot of speeding. People cut through, as they've already mentioned, on Kings Highway and Cherry Tree Lane. And I don't know how the kids are going to get to school safely. There's no sidewalk, you know. So, you know, if they looked at these counters to see the traffic impact on these other streets. I don't know.
Thank you. Are you over here with the, right here, you.
You were sworn earlier. Just give your name and address, please.
Okay, Carolyn Patrick, 19 County Court. I've attended most of the planning board meetings regarding this project. I listened to the developer and the public's comments with respect to the project. And I've come to a conclusion that some of the issues that have been brought up are valid and were not valid in my opinion. Some of the things I'd like to bring up tonight have to do with environmental issues, and specifically some of the testimony that was given in the August 7, 13 planning board meeting. I had a copy of the minutes, and at that point in time, I had been asking for whether or not an environmental expert was going to be presented, and I was told they were not going to be. I then proceeded to ask some questions of Mr. Coco regarding whether or not their general permit had been approved, whether or not there was going to be a need for a deed notice or any kind of fencing erected to prevent access to the wetlands and the wetlands transition areas. Mr. Coker's response to that was that there was no need for any fencing and there was no requirement for a restriction on the wetlands areas unless it's contaminated. I contacted the Department of Environmental Protection and I spoke with Mr. Gormlowski from the DEP who actually wrote the wetlands permit, and he informed me that there has to be a conservation restriction that runs with the deed to the property. And also that split rail fencing would have to be erected at the boundary of the wetland transition areas to prevent access to those areas. So at one point, in one of the meetings, I understand that the developer had asked for a waiver of Middletown's wetlands ordinance because they were specifically going to be following the DEP rules. As I pointed out to you, they obviously did not know what was in their permit, or did, and just are not going to be following them. So that's one consideration I'd like you to have when you're making your decision. Another issue I brought up in the same conversation with Mr. Coco was whether or not there had been a assessment of threatened and endangered species. He said there had been, and he had submitted it with his application, and he had submitted it with the DEP. And that because DEP approved his permits, or the developer's permit, that they in a sense agreed that there were no threatened and endangered species on the property. I had contacted DEP Land Use Regulation Unit and spoke with Larry Torek, a research scientist. And he had told me that the DEP database at that time showed no records of anything having been submitted for threatened and endangered species interpretation. And that he had also checked the mapping, and there could possibly be a species, an endangered species called the black-crowned night heron in the area. So, you know, whether or not their environmental study on the property was done years ago and it wasn't reported in DEP and they just didn't know about it, I'm not sure. But that's one issue that doesn't seem to have been addressed. I also asked Mr. Torek about whether or not another study should be done because it seems to me that they were using an old study. And he said, if it's an older study, they really should do another one. And they should get something called a natural heritage letter, which would determine whether or not their assessment of the property was correct. I'm not a wetlands expert. I'm not a threatened and endangered species expert. So this is just what I'm taking out of the conversations I had with the DEP people. I'd also like to bring up one last issue. I believe it was mentioned in one of the meetings that, or maybe not, that there was an article from the Daily Register dated April 14, 1976, where the article described a resident being concerned about the fact that tons and tons of dust oil was being placed on Taylor Lane. And there's also a statement from, I believe it was a DOT worker or a township road department person, that potholes were filled with slag. There are two issues with this. Slag and waste oil are considered contaminants. They contain carcinogenic contaminants. And the realignment of Taylor Lane would remove an asphalt path, which is keeping the contaminants in place. and it just exposed, would actually expose residents, nearby properties, and anybody working in the area to these contaminants. I believe that this would be considered a linear construction property where the person responsible for placing the contamination there would be required to remediate it, or the developer would have to take it on if the responsible party was not known. So that's one issue with regard to that. And let's see. Oh, okay. The second issue is that any contamination that was removed from underneath the road could not be placed or used as fill on virgin property without DEP approval. I'm not sure whether this is addressed. I'm not sure whether the realignment of the road is going to be in the areas where this material is placed. But at a minimum, I believe that sampling should be conducted to prove that there's no contamination on this road before the project is done. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
My name is Paul Rinaldi, 20 Birch Drive, and yes, I was before this morning. After listening to the year's worth of testimony from the developer's so-called experts, I'm saddened to think that the town will even consider this project. Mr. Cardell, when he asked you about fire safety, and he added separating the townhouses with a solid wall, their architect basically thumbed their nose at you and said it meets code, and that American Properties will not go beyond that. Is this a town-friendly developer not willing to provide additional safety to our residents? Because of this, Mr. Cardell, you must vote no. Mr. Rathjen, when you asked about the facade building materials, initially American Properties architect tried to wave their hands to describe the materials. After you insisted that they brought in samples of siding materials at the August meeting, but they would not guarantee that these would be the exact brands they would use, they would not have the quality that you wanted, or even the vinyl trim that would match. Again, they thumb their nose at you. Because of this, Mr. Ratchin, you must vote no. Ladies and gentlemen of the planning board, I'm going to address the traffic issues and concerns. As for traffic, 25 years of experience, Mr. Troutman, the developer's traffic expert, could not explain the traffic impact on the neighborhood behind the project, or how the neighborhood actually uses the inner roadways of the neighborhood. He never visited them, his testimony, and leans on the town's master plan, no first-hand research, and they want you to approve this project with shoddy information. Because of this, you must vote no. 25 years of experience, and he assumes that peak hour traffic is between 7 and 9 a.m. and 4 and 7 p.m. without measuring other times of day. The Middletown Master Plan shows that accidents are spread out throughout the day with no specific time frames. This is a clear indication that there is no such thing as peak hour traffic that the developer would want you to believe. They solely rely on DOT documentation that covers the entire state, not Taylor Lane. Because of this, you must vote no. 25 years, and he measures traffic in February and March of 2012. 2 winter months with no snow, extremely warm temperatures, and 2 of the highest unemployment months in the history of the United States. And he claims that this is normal. And he assumes all this based on statistical projections for past and future use. Don't be fooled by his lack of detailed information. Because of this, you must vote no. According to Mr. Troutman's own traffic reports, pages 12 through 16, daily traffic volume on Taylor Lane for 2015 will be 3,414 trips per day. This average daily traffic volume constitutes a minor collector road, 87 trips short of a major collector road. Let me remind you, this is a 4-year build-out. What will the traffic impact be on this once this project is completed? American Properties did not present any projections past 2015. Don't be fooled by their lack of information. Because of this, you must vote no. 25 years as a traffic expert, and he can't distinguish a bus from a car. Buses are not mentioned in this traffic study, even though New Jersey Transit publishes a schedule clearly stating that Taylor Avenue and Route 35, Taylor Lane Jug Handle, is a bus stop at 7 a.m. In addition, tonight, he also mentioned that no buses use Taylor Lane. I'm assuming he doesn't know the definition of a bus, because there are plenty of school buses every day on that road. Competent research? I think not. Because of this, you must vote no. 25 years, and he chose not to respond to our town planner's written request for more traffic surveys. This is a slap in our faces. Because of this, you must vote no. The Taylor Lane easement is set by a specific latitude and longitude, not by the fact that it connects to Route 35. According to the judge that ruled on this, and that ruling was submitted to the planning board, the road cannot be moved, relocated, or otherwise changed. The developer and his experts refused to acknowledge that this is an unmovable easement that exists on this property. This choice is not yours or the developer's. It was set by Judge Hartman Fisher, the Monmouth County Chancery Judge. Because of this, you must vote no. At the October 2nd Planning Board meeting, Mr. Troutman referred to pages 21 through 23 of the Township Master Plan concerning primary versus secondary roads and insists that Taylor Lane is a local road. And if you would have taken the time to read a little further on the master plan, page 22 defines a collector street, and I quote, "Collector streets, which are municipal roadways, should have a minimum right-of-way width of 60 feet with one moving lane of traffic in each direction." The developer submits that Taylor Lane is not in the master plan as a collector road, even with this property being rezoned. What they failed to recognize is that the master plan also stated on page 28 that Taylor Lane should connect with either Cherry Tree Farm Road or Palmer Avenue. How can you classify a road when you're not sure where it will connect? I guess they thought the planning board would be mind readers. Don't let their sleight of hand fool you. Because of this, you must vote no. The developer and their experts continually pick and choose which sections of the master plan are convenient for their case, and ignore the remainder of the plan where information is contrary to their case. If they choose to follow the master plan, they must follow the entire master plan, not just the parts they want. We believe that you, the members of the planning board, are smarter than that to be fooled by these oversights. Because of this, you must vote no. 25 years experience and their traffic expert hands you a report filled with conflicts between what he counted and the residential site improvement standards published by the state of New Jersey. Who do you believe? Mr. Livornia, who wrote the book, or Jay Troutman, the guy who was supposed to read the book? Because of this, you must vote no. And one last thing. When AT&T proposed putting in 2 million square feet of additional office space, there were a few people from the public who came before the board and endorsed the proposal. Now, after about a year's worth of testimony and presentation, not once have I heard one person from the public come before this planning board and state that they thought that this was a good idea. Ladies and gentlemen of the planning board, because of this, because of my previous comments, and because all the misleading information presented to you by the developer, you must deny this project. Because of this, you must vote no. Thank you.
Robert Bennett, 28 Birch Drive. Well, thank you all for your patience on this. It's been a long series of meetings and late nights. Just quickly, I want to bring up some people that are not up to speed. The way we got here. There was a meeting of the zoning board to rezone the property along Taylor Lane that occurred with very little notification to the community. I realize that due to the fact this was an amendment to the master plan, legally, there was no obligation to do anything more than placing a notice in a publication to inform the community about the subject of the upcoming board meeting. I believe that at the absolute minimum, the residents adjoining the property should have been individually notified. I know some people have a personal or political agenda to push this through, but it should not be done in a duplicitous manner to the detriment of the taxpayers in the community. Had we been informed of the zoning meeting, we might not have had to go through what we're going through now. Anyone that served on the zoning or planning board in Middletown for a period of time knows that this community has been extremely organized and vocal regarding this property. It seems to have been pushed through with the intent of avoiding any response from the community. With that being said, a few comments on the testimony that's been given. First, some of the opinions of the applicant's traffic expert. Most of the residents of our community that need to get to the schools, the train station, or the parkway take the back roads: Taylor Lane, Devonshire, and Cherry Tree. He said the traffic expert said he anticipated up to a 25% increase in volume. And it would have little, if no, impact on the neighborhood, and the existing roads are adequate to handle the volume. Previously, when I asked if the roads could handle 40%, 50%, or 100% of the proposed development, the answer was yes. I just wonder if there was is there any increase in the road volume, traffic volume on the roads that the roads could withstand? On page 29, item 6, 2004 master plan, there addresses traffic issues on Church and Kings Highway. This is where a lot of the traffic will be drawn to. It says northbound congestion has been increasing at this intersection as a result of increased traffic volumes, inadequate turning lanes, and substandard site distance. A substandard site